The war was over, but the echoes of it lingered in every corner of Hogwarts and in the hearts of those who had survived. Harry Potter had defeated Voldemort, yet victory carried its own heavy silence. The world seemed to expect him to move forward quickly, to step into a life of peace and gratitude, but Harry often found himself restless, searching for something more. He would walk through the rebuilt corridors of the castle, tracing the memories etched into its walls, feeling both proud and haunted. Hermione Granger was the same. She had thrown herself into helping restore the wizarding world. She spent her days in the ministry pushing for reforms, demanding justice for creatures and wizards alike, making sure no one would ever suffer as they had under Voldemort's shadow. But though her passion drove her forward, there was a loneliness beneath it all. Friends were around her, yes, but life after war was not simply about laws and victories. She had lost something too, something unspoken. Ron, for all his laughter and loyalty during the war, seemed to drift in another direction. He worked at his brother's joke shop, and though Hermione tried to be happy for him, she felt the space between them grow wider. Their dreams no longer aligned, and neither wanted to admit it. She needed something steady, someone who understood the scars of the past and the weight of expectations. It was during one late evening at Grimald Place, when Harry had invited Hermione over for tea, that the possibility of a different future began. They sat by the fire, the silence between them heavy but not uncomfortable. Harry's eyes caught hers, and there was something unspoken, some recognition that they had always been more than just comrades. Hermione broke the silence first. "Do you ever feel like everyone expects us to already know who we're supposed to be after the war?" she asked, her voice soft. Harry nodded. "Every day. They look at me like I should have all the answers. But most nights, I still wake up expecting another battle." She gave him a faint smile. "I know the feeling." That night, neither of them planned it, neither of them spoke about it, but the loneliness that had haunted them both found comfort. It was not dramatic or rushed. It was quiet, like the end of a storm when the air clears and you realize the world is still standing. Weeks passed and their bond deepened. Hermione found herself at Grimald Place more often, and Harry discovered that her presence steadied him. Where once their lives had been filled with fear, now they began to share laughter, small hopes, and even arguments about the future. They built something ordinary yet precious, a kind of life neither had dared to imagine during the war. Then came the moment that changed everything. Hermione had been pacing in the small kitchen, holding a letter in her hands, her face pale. Harry entered, concern etched into his voice. "Hermione, what's wrong?" She turned to him, her breath trembling. "Harry, I think I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air. For a moment, Harry could only stare, his mind racing. The thought of being a father seemed impossible, almost unreal. Yet as the shock settled, he saw the fear in Hermione's eyes and stepped closer, taking her hand. "Are you sure?" he asked. She nodded. "I used a diagnostic charm twice. There's no mistake." 1,000 thoughts rushed through him, questions, doubts, the weight of responsibility, but one feeling rose above the rest. Hope. The idea of creating a new life after so much destruction felt like the most powerful act of defiance against the darkness they had endured. "Hermione," Harry said quietly, "we'll figure this out. Together." Her tears spilled, but they were not of despair. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel the possibility of a future brighter than laws and reforms, brighter than the memories of war. Still, the road ahead was not simple. The wizarding world would have questions. Friends would be shocked. Ron, especially, would be hurt, and neither Harry nor Hermione looked forward to that conversation. But the war had taught them both that life was too fragile to be lived for others' approval. Over the next few weeks, they began to prepare, cautiously at first. Harry repaired a broken cradle he found in the attic of Grimald Place, his hands moving carefully as though the act itself was sacred. Hermione read everything she could find about magical pregnancy, from charms that eased morning sickness to protective wards for expectant mothers. The house that had once been filled with shadows slowly began to transform into a home, carrying with it the warmth of anticipation. One evening, as they sat together, Harry placed his hand on Hermione's stomach, almost afraid to breathe. "It's strange," he whispered. "I never thought I'd live long enough to have this. A family." Hermione covered his hand with hers. Neither did I. But maybe that's why it feels right. After everything, maybe we deserve this. For the first time in years, Harry allowed himself to believe it. They both did. And though the world outside was still healing, within the walls of Grimald Place, something new had begun. Something that promised not just survival, but life. The news of Hermione's pregnancy remained a secret between her and Harry for the first month. They wanted time to adjust, to feel grounded before sharing it with the rest of the world. But secrets, no matter how carefully held, always carried weight, and both of them knew they couldn't keep it hidden forever. Hermione often found herself sitting by the window of Grimald Place, staring out at the London streets below. The war had left her with a mind that rarely rested, but now it was filled with new anxieties. She had thought she was prepared for anything. Years of fighting had trained her for the unexpected. But motherhood was not a battle, it was a beginning. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Harry noticed her unease. He always did. One evening, he walked into the room carrying 2 mugs of tea, setting one gently in front of her before sitting across the table. "You're thinking too much again," he said with a small smile. "I'm pregnant, Harry." "I think I'm allowed to think too much," she replied, though her lips curved faintly upward. He leaned forward. "We'll take it one step at a time. That's all we can do. Just like we always have." The reassurance calmed her, though only slightly. She knew Harry meant every word, but she also knew that reality was waiting outside. The Ministry. Their friends. The Weasleys. Especially Ron. The opportunity to tell Ron came sooner than either expected. George had invited Harry and Hermione to the Burrow for dinner, an attempt to bring everyone together after the months of quiet distance. Hermione almost refused, nerves knotting in her stomach, but Harry convinced her. "They're our family," he reminded her. "It's better to tell them than let them hear it from someone else." When they arrived, Molly Weasley greeted them with open arms, ushering them into the familiar warmth of the Burrow. The smells of stew and fresh bread filled the kitchen, and for a moment, Hermione almost forgot the storm that lay ahead. But as she glanced around the room, her eyes found Ron. He laughed at something George said, but when he looked up and saw Hermione standing beside Harry, his expression faltered, just slightly. The dinner began light-hearted enough, with stories and laughter echoing around the table. But Hermione could feel the tension building like a storm cloud, waiting to break. Halfway through the meal, Harry set his fork down, his expression steady. "There's something we need to tell you," he said, his voice firm but calm. Every pair of eyes turned toward them. Hermione reached under the table for Harry's hand, gripping it tightly. Hermione took a breath. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was suffocating. Molly's eyes widened, her hands flying to her mouth in shock. Ginny froze mid-bite, staring at Harry, while George let out a low whistle of surprise. But Ron. Ron's face turned pale, then red, anger simmering just beneath the surface. "You're joking," he said, his voice strained. "Tell me you're joking." Harry shook his head. "We wouldn't lie about this." Ron pushed back his chair, standing abruptly. How could you both do this? After everything?" "Ron," Hermione began, her voice breaking. But Ron didn't let her finish. "We fought side by side for years, and this is how it ends? You, together, having a child? What was I then? Just a stepping stone until you found something better." The room was frozen in shock. Molly tried to reach for Ron, but he pulled away, his hurt too raw. He looked between Harry and Hermione as if seeing strangers. "I can't stay here," Ron muttered, his voice shaking. Without another word, he stormed out, the door slamming shut behind him. The silence that followed was heavier than anything Hermione had felt in years. Tears blurred her vision, guilt and grief tangling in her chest. Harry squeezed her hand beneath the table, but his own heart ached. Molly finally spoke, her voice trembling. "You should have told him gently, not like this, not in front of everyone." "We thought honesty was best," Harry said quietly. Arthur leaned back, his expression thoughtful but weary. "Ron needs time. He's always struggled with feeling overshadowed. It won't be easy for him." Ginny, though silent until now, finally spoke. Her words were sharp, but her eyes betrayed hurt. "You could have told me too, Harry. I deserved to know before dinner at the table." Harry lowered his gaze. "I know. I'm sorry." The rest of the evening passed in strained conversation, the warmth of the Burrow diminished by tension. When Harry and Hermione finally left, Hermione could hardly speak. As they walked back through the dark countryside toward Grimald Place, she finally whispered, "Did we make a mistake?" Harry stopped, turning her toward him. "No, we didn't. It's hard, Hermione. It's going to be hard. But this child is not a mistake. And one day they'll all see that." Hermione wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that time could heal the rift that had just opened. But she also knew that nothing would ever be the same. In the weeks that followed, the wizarding world slowly began to whisper. News spread faster than they imagined, and soon everyone seemed to know that Harry Potter and Hermione Granger were expecting a child. Reactions were divided. Some were supportive, seeing it as a symbol of hope after the war. Others questioned it, whispering that Hermione had betrayed Ron or that Harry had abandoned Ginny. Rumors twisted their story into something it was not. Through it all, Harry and Hermione leaned on each other. Harry shielded her from the harshest gossip, and Hermione reminded him of their strength. When doubts threatened to creep in, they clung to the simple truth. They were building something together, something worth fighting for. One evening, as Hermione lay curled on the sofa, exhaustion pulling at her, Harry draped a blanket over her and sat beside her quietly. He placed his hand on her stomach again, a habit that had become second nature. "Whoever you are," he whispered softly to the unborn child, "we're going to give you a life better than ours. I promise." Hermione stirred, her eyes opening just enough to catch the tenderness in his expression. Her heart swelled, and for the first time since telling Ron, she felt a flicker of peace. Because even if the world doubted them, and even if friends turned away, she and Harry had chosen each other. And soon they would choose their child too. The weeks that followed Ron's outburst at the Burrow were some of the most difficult Harry and Hermione had ever faced. It wasn't the whispers of the public or the scrutiny of the Daily Prophet that weighed heaviest on them, but the silence from someone who had once been their closest friend. Ron avoided them completely. He refused Harry's owls, ignored Hermione's attempts to reach out, and even stopped showing up at gatherings if there was the slightest chance they would be present. Hermione felt the loss acutely. She had imagined Ron would always be a part of her life, even if they hadn't worked out as a couple. Now, it felt as if the bond forged through years of friendship had shattered in an instant. Her nights were restless, not just from the pregnancy, but from the guilt pressing on her chest. Harry noticed. He always noticed. One evening as Hermione sat in the library of Grimald Place, her hands resting protectively over her still flat stomach, Harry placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Don't blame yourself," he said softly. She looked up at him, eyes glistening. "But I do. I keep thinking about how we told him, how shocked he looked. Maybe if I had spoken to him alone, maybe if I had been more careful." Harry crouched in front of her, cutting her off with a steady gaze. "Hermione, there wasn't a perfect way. He was always going to struggle with it. You didn't betray him. You made a choice for your future, for our future. That doesn't erase everything we went through with him. It doesn't erase your loyalty or your friendship. It just means things are changing." She wanted to argue, but his words settled something inside her. Change. The war had already taught them change was inevitable, sometimes brutal. Perhaps this was just another kind of change they would need to survive. Amidst the tension with Ron, other friendships began to shift. Ginny kept her distance at first, struggling with her own emotions, but unlike Ron, she didn't shut them out completely. One day, she visited Grimald Place unannounced. Hermione was startled when Creature ushered her into the drawing room, where she found Harry repairing a small rocking chair he had discovered in the attic. "Ginny," Harry said, surprised but relieved. She looked at him with an expression torn between anger and affection. "I was furious, Harry. Not because you're with Hermione, but because you didn't trust me enough to tell me before everyone else." Harry put down his tools, his voice calm but apologetic. "You're right. I should have. I was afraid of disappointing you, of hurting you again. And I didn't want to lose one more person I cared about." Ginny's face softened. "You didn't lose me. I just needed time. We're not what we used to be, and that's all right. But don't ever think you can protect me by keeping me out. I grew up fighting too, remember?" Harry smiled faintly, relief washing over him. Hermione, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. "Ginny, thank you. I know this can't be easy, but your support means more than I can say. Ginny gave her a small nod. Just promise me one thing. Promise me that you'll make sure this child grows up knowing love, not the weight of expectations. The world is going to see them as the child of Harry Potter and Hermione Granger. Don't let that define them. Hermione felt her throat tighten, but she managed to say, "We promise." From that day on, Ginny became a quiet but steady ally. She visited Hermione often, helping her prepare and offering advice she'd picked up from Molly. The tension didn't vanish overnight, but bonds began to mend, and for Hermione, it was a small comfort amidst the larger storm. The pregnancy itself soon became impossible to ignore. Morning sickness plagued her for weeks, leaving her drained and irritable. Harry did everything he could to ease her discomfort, brewing potions and even learning simple household charms he had never bothered with before. He burned more than one dinner, much to Hermione's amusement, but the effort touched her more deeply than words could express. One evening, after another failed attempt at stew, Harry slumped into the chair opposite Hermione. "You're never letting me near the kitchen again, are you?" he muttered. Hermione chuckled, shaking her head. "I appreciate the effort, but no, I don't think I can risk it." Harry grinned, then reached across the table to take her hand. "I may not be the best cook, but I'll do whatever it takes to make sure you're all right." And he meant it. Every day, every gesture, Harry proved to Hermione that this wasn't just about duty or obligation. He wanted this life with her. He wanted their child, their future. Yet, for all the warmth growing between them, the shadows of the outside world never disappeared. The Daily Prophet ran endless articles speculating about the baby, some supportive, others cruel. One morning, Hermione opened the paper to see a headline blaring across the front page. Harry Potter's legacy child, savior or scandal. Her hands trembled as she read the article, which questioned whether Harry and Hermione's relationship was a betrayal to Ron and whether their child would ever escape the burden of fame. Harry found her staring at the paper, her expression a mixture of anger and despair. "They don't know us," Harry said firmly, snatching the paper and tossing it into the fire. "And they don't get to decide who our child will be." Hermione blinked back tears, grateful for his strength, but inside, she couldn't shake the fear. Would their child ever truly have a normal life? It was in the midst of these doubts that a moment of quiet wonder changed everything. One night, as Hermione lay in bed, she felt a flutter, so faint she almost missed it. She froze, her hand flying to her stomach. "Harry," she whispered urgently. He stirred beside her. "What is it?" She grabbed his hand, pressing it against her stomach. "The baby, it moved. I felt it." Harry's eyes widened, and for a long moment he was silent, his hand resting where hers was. Then slowly he felt it too, the faintest flutter of life. His breath caught. "That's them," Hermione whispered, her voice breaking with awe. Harry's eyes filled with tears he didn't bother to hide. "Hello there," he whispered, his voice tender and reverent. "We've been waiting for you." In that moment, all the doubts, all the fears seemed to fade. The world outside could whisper, friends could turn away, and the prophet could spin whatever stories it liked. None of it mattered compared to this tiny sign of life, this undeniable proof that something new and precious was growing between them. Hermione rested her head on Harry's shoulder, her heart finally at peace, if only for a little while. For the first time, the future didn't seem frightening. It seemed possible. Autumn settled over London, painting the streets in shades of gold and crimson. For Harry and Hermione, the changing season felt symbolic. Their lives, once defined by battles and shadows, were slowly shifting into something new. Yet even as they prepared for the arrival of their child, the world outside refused to let them live in peace. The Ministry of Magic had begun to take notice of the whispers surrounding them. Hermione, who continued her work there despite her pregnancy, quickly realized that her colleagues viewed her differently. Some treated her with sympathy, others with subtle judgment. Meetings that once welcomed her sharp mind now carried an undercurrent of gossip. She overheard whispers in the corridors, questioning her loyalty, her choices, even her judgment. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling day of being patronized by senior officials, Hermione arrived home exhausted. She found Harry in the drawing room, bent over baby clothes he had bought in Diagon Alley. He looked up at her and smiled, holding up a tiny knitted hat. "What do you think?" "Too small," he asked, trying to lighten the mood. Hermione sank into the nearest chair, covering her face with her hands. I don't know if I can keep working there, Harry. Not like this. He sat beside her, concern etched across his features. What happened? She dropped her hands, revealing tired eyes. They don't see me the same anymore. I'm not Hermione Granger, or heroine or advocate for reform. I'm just the woman carrying Harry Potter's child. Everything I say, everything I do gets twisted. They question my decisions as if I can't think clearly because I'm pregnant. Harry's jaw tightened. That's not fair. You've done more for the ministry than half of them combined. I know, she whispered, her voice breaking. But knowing it doesn't make it easier. I want to fight for change, Harry. I always will. But right now, I don't know if I can keep fighting battles inside the ministry while carrying a child. He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. Then don't. You don't have to prove anything to them. You've already given more than anyone could ask. Maybe this is the time to focus on yourself, on us, on the baby. The ministry will still be there when you're ready to go back. Hermione hesitated, but the relief in her heart told her he was right. She had fought tirelessly for years. Perhaps now it was time to fight for her own life. In the days that followed, Hermione took a leave of absence from the ministry. At first, it felt strange, even wrong, to step away from the work that had defined her. But soon, she began to find solace in the quiet moments, reading by the fire, sketching plans for a nursery, or simply sitting in the garden with Harry, planning their future. Harry, meanwhile, had taken on a new role at the Auror office. Kingsley Shacklebolt, now Minister of Magic, had offered him the chance to train recruits rather than throw himself into dangerous missions. Harry accepted, knowing he couldn't risk leaving Hermione and the baby vulnerable. The work was demanding, but it allowed him to feel useful without constantly endangering himself. One evening, after a long day of training young Aurors, Harry returned home to find Hermione in the nursery. The once dark and dusty room had been transformed. Pale yellow walls glowed softly in the lamplight, shelves were lined with children's books, and the repaired cradle stood proudly in the corner. Hermione stood near the window, a faint smile on her face as she looked around. You've outdone yourself, Harry said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. I wanted it to feel safe, she replied softly. After everything we've been through, I want our child to know safety from the very beginning. Harry kissed the top of her head. They will. Because they'll have you. For a brief moment, the future seemed certain, full of quiet joy. But the past had a way of creeping back when least expected. One evening, as they prepared for bed, an owl tapped at the window. Harry recognized the handwriting on the envelope instantly, Ron's. His heart pounded as he handed it to Hermione, who opened it with trembling hands. The letter was short, but every word was heavy. I need to speak to you. Both of you. Meet me at the Leaky Cauldron tomorrow evening. Ron. Hermione's stomach twisted with nerves. Do you think he's ready to listen? Harry looked uncertain, but he nodded. We have to try. The next evening, they arrived at the Leaky Cauldron early, nerves on edge. The pub was crowded but cozy, the air filled with chatter and the clink of glasses. They found a quiet corner table and waited. When Ron finally walked in, his presence filled the room. He looked tired, older somehow, but his eyes still carried the same fire. He spotted them immediately and walked over, his steps heavy with unspoken words. He sat across from them, silent for a long moment. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough. I was angry. I still am. But I've had time to think. You're my friends. My best friends. I don't want to lose that. Hermione's eyes welled with tears. Ron, we never wanted to hurt you. He shook his head. I know. It doesn't mean it didn't hurt. But maybe I need to accept that things are different now. You've got a future together. A family. He glanced at Hermione's stomach, his expression conflicted but softer than before. I'm not saying it's easy, but I don't want to shut you out completely. Harry leaned forward. Ron, you'll always be part of our lives. And our child's too, if you want to be. Ron looked down, fiddling with his hands. I don't know if I'm ready for that. But maybe one day. It wasn't reconciliation, not fully, but it was a step. For the first time since the Burrow, there was a glimmer of hope that their friendship might survive, though it would never be quite the same again. That night, as Harry and Hermione returned home, Hermione rested her head against Harry's shoulder. "Do you think he'll come around?" she asked softly. Harry wrapped an arm around her. "I think he already has a little. It's not perfect, but it's something. And that's enough for now." They walked into the quiet of Grimald Place together, the flicker of candlelight casting long shadows across the walls. For all the uncertainty ahead, one truth remained unshakable. They were no longer just survivors of a war. They were builders of a future. And in that future, a child was waiting. Winter crept over London, cloaking the city in frost and filling the windows of Grimald Place with icy patterns. Inside, the house glowed with warmth. Hermione had taken to wearing soft woolen robes, her growing belly becoming more pronounced with each passing week. Harry often caught himself staring in quiet wonder, still half in disbelief that after all the battles, the grief, and the endless nights of uncertainty, this was his life now. But not everything was simple. While Ron had extended a fragile olive branch, the scars of their friendship remained visible. He didn't visit often, though he occasionally sent short notes, awkwardly polite, as though testing whether he could re-enter their world without reopening old wounds. Ginny visited more frequently, and even Molly sent care packages of baby clothes and knitted blankets, though her letters carried an undercurrent of longing for what might have been if life had gone differently. Hermione felt these things deeply. She always had. Though she tried to focus on her health and preparing for the baby, she could not stop herself from analyzing every word, every look, every shift in their friendships. One snowy afternoon, as she sat by the fire reading a book on magical child development, she sighed heavily. Harry, who was practicing defensive charms across the room, lowered his wand immediately. "What is it?" he asked. She closed the book gently, pressing a hand to her side. "I can't help but feel that we've upset the balance. Everyone seems unsettled by us, by the baby. I wonder if we've made things harder for everyone we care about." Harry walked over, crouching beside her chair. He placed a hand on her stomach, feeling the faint movement beneath. "Hermione, nothing about this is wrong. We've fought for a world where people can live freely, make choices without fear. This is ours. If it unsettles others, that's for them to come to terms with, not us." Her eyes softened as she looked at him, but she still whispered, "I just don't want our child to grow up under the shadow of tension." He kissed her hand gently. "Then we'll make sure they grow up in the light." As the weeks passed, their preparations continued. Harry painted the final details in the nursery while Hermione organized books, clothes, and charms for safety. Every choice, every step felt significant, as though they were laying down pieces of a future neither had dared to dream. But beyond the walls of Grimald Place, the wizarding world continued to spin. Harry's work at the Auror office intensified as new threats began to emerge. The fall of Voldemort had not ended all darkness. Remnants of his followers lingered, disorganized but dangerous. Kingsley asked Harry to keep his eyes open, reminding him that peace was fragile. One evening, Harry came home later than usual, his robes marked with ash and soot. Hermione rushed to him the moment he stepped inside. "What happened?" she demanded, worry flaring in her chest. "Nothing to worry about," Harry reassured, though his eyes betrayed exhaustion. "A group of old Death Eater sympathizers tried to stir up trouble in Nocturne Alley. We stopped them before it got out of hand." Hermione frowned, her hand tightening around his arm. "You promised you wouldn't put yourself in danger." He sighed, sinking into a chair. "I didn't plan for it, Hermione. But when things happen, I can't just turn away." She lowered herself beside him, frustration warring with fear. "You're not just an Auror anymore, Harry. You're about to be a father. That has to come first." Her words struck him harder than he expected. He looked at her, seeing not just the worry in her eyes but the truth. He wasn't the boy who had run headfirst into danger anymore. He was a man building a family, with responsibilities that stretched beyond himself. "You're right," he admitted quietly. "I'll talk to Kingsley. Maybe I can focus more on training recruits, less on field work. I don't want to risk leaving you alone." Hermione's shoulders relaxed slightly, though her eyes remained serious. "That's all I want. I don't want our child to grow up never knowing you." They sat in silence for a long while, the fire crackling softly. Then Hermione guided his hand once more to her stomach, where their child kicked gently. Harry's lips curved into a tired but genuine smile. "She's strong," he whispered. Hermione chuckled. Or he. Either way, Harry replied, his voice firm. They'll have both of us. Always. Time pressed forward, and soon Hermione entered her third trimester. Her steps slowed, her body ached, but her spirit remained sharp. She began keeping a journal, writing letters to their unborn child. Some were full of advice about kindness and courage. Others were simply confessions of love and hope. Harry discovered the journal one night and asked if he could add entries too. Soon, the book became a shared gift, filled with both of their voices, a testament to the life they were about to welcome. Despite the hope filling their home, unease lingered at the edges. Ron's distance grew again after their meeting at the leaky cauldron. He wrote less frequently, and when he did, the letters were clipped, polite but lacking warmth. Hermione tried not to dwell on it, but it hurt. Harry tried to reassure her, though he too felt the sting of the absence. One cold evening, as snow drifted outside the windows, a knock echoed through Grimald Place. Harry opened the door to find Neville Longbottom standing there, bundled against the cold, his face lit with a warm smile. "Neville," Harry greeted, surprised but pleased. Neville stepped inside, shaking the snow from his cloak. "I thought it was time I checked in. Heard the big news, of course. Couldn't stay away." Hermione's face lit up with genuine joy as she embraced him. "It's so good to see you. You've been busy at Hogwarts." Neville laughed. "Busy doesn't even begin to cover it. But hearing about you too, about the baby, I had to come. I wanted to say congratulations in person." For the rest of the evening, the three of them sat by the fire, sharing stories, laughing, and reminiscing. For the first time in weeks, the house was filled with uncomplicated joy. Neville's presence reminded them of everything they had fought for, of friendships that endured, of hope that refused to die. As the night drew to a close, Neville raised his glass of butterbeer. "To the next generation," he said with a grin. "May they have a life free of the battles we fought." Harry and Hermione clinked their glasses with his, smiles spreading across their faces. And though neither said it aloud, both silently prayed that Neville's toast would come true. Spring crept into the city, and with it came the sense that time was running quickly toward the day Hermione and Harry would finally meet their child. The nursery was ready, the cradle polished and charmed, the shelves lined with books and toys. But no amount of preparation quieted the anticipation that grew in both of them with every passing week. Hermione, though weary from the weight she carried, moved with a determination that reminded Harry of the girl he had first met on the Hogwarts Express years ago. She made lists, adjusted charms, reread her journal entries, and insisted on perfecting every detail, though Harry often teased her gently about her endless planning. "You've checked the wards on the nursery 3 times this week," he said one morning, sipping tea as she paced. "And I'll check them again," Hermione retorted, her tone brisk. "You never know when something might fail." Harry chuckled, watching her fondly. "You're going to make the best mother. Our child won't have a chance to get into trouble." She smirked. "Do you honestly believe that? With your genes?" Their laughter filled the kitchen, a sound so natural it almost masked the weight of the past. Almost. News of Hermione's leave from the ministry had spread, but instead of fading from public attention, her name and Harry's continued to appear in the Prophet. Their every move was analyzed, their relationship dissected, their child already spoken of as a symbol before even being born. Hermione tried to ignore it, but one morning she found an article speculating about whether their child might be burdened with the legacy of Harry's fame, destined to be either great or crushed by expectation. She folded the paper sharply, tossing it into the bin. Harry, who had been watching, said nothing at first. He simply walked over, placed a hand over hers, and whispered, "They don't matter. What matters is what we teach our child, not what they say." She nodded, but her heart carried the unease long after the words faded. Meanwhile, Harry had begun his transition at the Auror office. Kingsley, true to his word, shifted him into training roles, though not without protest from Harry at first. It was strange to stand back, to guide others instead of throwing himself into danger. But each time he saw Hermione's tired smile or felt the faint kick of their child beneath his hand, he knew it was the right choice. Neville's visit had sparked something in them both. They reached out to more friends, inviting Luna, Dean, and even Seamus for tea. Slowly, Grimald Place began to feel less like the haunted relic of Sirius's past, and more like a home alive with laughter and companionship. Hermione often thought the house itself seemed brighter, as though the walls had absorbed enough love to shake off their old shadows. But not every shadow stayed gone. One evening, as the last of their guests left, Harry stepped out to fetch the post. Among the usual letters and parcels, one envelope stood out. It was sealed in dark green wax, marked with a serpent's emblem. Harry's chest tightened. He opened it carefully, reading the words with growing unease. Potter, you may have defeated the Dark Lord, but you did not destroy all who believed in him. Some of us remain. You flaunt your so-called victory with your child-to-be, as though you are untouchable. Be warned. Not all wars end with your wand. No signature followed, only the mark of a serpent scrawled at the bottom. Harry folded the letter quickly, hiding it before Hermione returned to the hallway. She noticed his stiff posture but said nothing, though later that night, as he lay awake beside her, the letter's threat burned in his mind. He had hoped the remnants of Voldemort's followers would fade into obscurity, but the truth was clear. Not everyone was willing to let go. The following morning, Harry slipped the letter into a drawer in his study, warding it so Hermione wouldn't stumble upon it accidentally. He told himself he was protecting her, sparing her the worry, but guilt gnawed at him. She had always been his partner in truth, and now he was keeping a secret. Days passed, and Hermione noticed his distraction. He smiled when she caught him brooding, but she could see the lines of tension etched around his eyes. She didn't press him, not yet. Her own body demanded enough of her strength. The baby shifted constantly now, tiny movements that reminded her every day how close they were to a new chapter. One evening, as they sat together in the nursery, Harry rocking gently in the chair while Hermione rested on the bed, the baby kicked sharply, making her gasp. "Merlin, that was strong," she said, her hand flying to her stomach. Harry leaned forward instantly, placing his hand there too. Another kick greeted him, stronger this time, and he laughed, eyes wide with wonder. "They're already a fighter," he whispered. Hermione smiled, though exhaustion softened the edges of her joy. "Then let's hope they inherit more of your courage and less of your recklessness." For a while, they sat in silence, the quiet punctuated only by the crackle of the fire and the rhythmic creak of the rocking chair. It was a moment of peace, fragile but real. Harry clung to it, wishing it could last forever. But when Hermione drifted into sleep, Harry slipped back to his study, reopening the drawer where the threatening letter lay. His jaw tightened as he reread the words. He had thought he left the war behind, but the war had not left him. He swore then, silently and fiercely, that whoever had written those words would never touch his family. Not while he lived. The shadows might still linger in corners of their world, but Harry was no longer just a boy chosen to fight. He was a man about to become a father. And for his child, he would face anything. The weeks slipped by in a steady rhythm, marked by doctor visits, ministry paperwork, and long quiet evenings at Grimald Place. Hermione's belly had grown noticeably, and every time Harry looked at her, he felt both awe and a nervous flutter he couldn't quite name. Their child was no longer a distant idea. It was real, alive, pressing gently against the world that waited. Hermione spent her mornings curled on the sofa with stacks of baby books, parchment notes, and a quill that never seemed to stop scratching. Harry teased her for studying as if she had exams again, but in truth, he loved watching her organize the chaos into something that felt manageable. "You've written more notes about feeding schedules than I wrote for my oral exams," he said one afternoon, leaning over her shoulder. She smirked without looking up. "That explains why you nearly failed your theory section." Harry chuckled, shaking his head. "You'll raise our child to be brilliant. I'll just make sure they don't trip over themselves while doing it." But beneath their banter, a current of unease ran through Harry. The threatening letter still weighed heavily on his mind. He carried it with him silently, like an invisible scar. He told himself that speaking of it would only cause Hermione stress she didn't need, but with every passing day, the choice to hide it gnawed at him. That tension became harder to mask when he returned home late one evening from the Auror office. His robes were rumpled, his eyes shadowed. Hermione looked up from her chair in the living room, frowning. "You've been late 3 nights this week. What's going on?" Harry froze for a moment before forcing a smile. "Paperwork. Kingsley's drowning me in training reports." Hermione studied him carefully. She had lived too long by Harry's side not to notice when something was wrong. She wanted to press, to demand the truth, but the weight of her own exhaustion held her back. She simply nodded, though suspicion lingered in her gaze. The next morning, Neville stopped by again, bringing with him a bundle of flowers from the Hogwarts greenhouses. The scent filled the room, warm and calming, and Hermione brightened immediately. "From the Herbology Club," Neville said proudly. "They wanted to wish you well." Harry smiled in thanks, but Neville's sharp eyes caught the tension in his posture. When Hermione excused herself to rest, Neville leaned closer to Harry. "What's really bothering you?" he asked quietly. Harry hesitated. Neville was not only a friend, but someone who understood the shadow of the war in a way few others did. Slowly, Harry fetched the letter from his study and handed it over. Neville read it, his jaw tightening. "You should have told Hermione," Neville said after a moment. "I know," Harry admitted. "But she's so close now. She doesn't need the stress." Neville's expression softened slightly, though the sternness didn't leave his voice. "Hiding it won't protect her, Harry. If anything happens, she'll need to know what we're up against." Harry exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. He knew Neville was right. He promised himself he'd tell Hermione soon. Just not yet. Not when her health and peace were so fragile. That evening, Harry sat with Hermione in the nursery. She leaned against him, her breathing slow, her hand resting on her stomach. He wanted to tell her then, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he pressed a kiss to her temple and whispered, "I'll keep you safe. Always." Hermione, half asleep, murmured something soft in reply, but Harry's thoughts were far away, circling the threat he could not ignore. 2 days later, the tension broke. Harry was in Diagon Alley, picking up a set of charms recommended by the healers, when he noticed a figure lingering near the shop. The man wore a hood, his stance stiff, his eyes following Harry with a focus that sent alarms ringing in his mind. When Harry stepped closer, the figure vanished into the crowd. He returned home unsettled, his wand hand twitching long after. Hermione, noticing his distracted state, finally confronted him. "Harry, this isn't just about work, is it? Something's wrong." Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned with the sharpness of someone who refused to be left in the dark. Harry realized he could no longer keep it from her. Slowly, he told her about the letter, about the hooded figure, about his fear that remnants of Voldemort's supporters were still out there. Hermione listened silently, her face pale but steady. When he finished, she reached for his hand. "You should have told me sooner," she said, her tone firm but not unkind. "We've always faced everything together. I may be tired, and I may be about to give birth, but I am not fragile glass, Harry." Guilt swept through him, but her words also filled him with relief. Finally, the weight was shared. Hermione squeezed his hand tightly. "Then we prepare. Together. Whatever is coming, our child will be born into a home that will not bow to fear." Harry nodded, feeling the fire of her determination reignite his own. They had faced darkness before, and they would face it again. But this time, they had more than themselves to fight for. They had a future to protect. Outside Grimald Place, the evening settled into silence, but the city seemed to hold its breath, as though the world itself was bracing for what was to come. The tension that had hung between them seemed to ease once Harry finally confessed about the letter. For days afterward, Hermione kept a steady calm about her, but Harry knew she was processing every word he had said. It was her way, always analyzing, turning things over until a solution formed in her mind. "I've already strengthened the wards on the house," Hermione told him one morning, tapping her quill against her parchment. "But we need layered protections. If someone is watching us, they'll be looking for weaknesses." Harry frowned. "We can't make it a fortress, Hermione. This is supposed to be our home, not Azkaban." She gave him a sharp look. "Our child will live here, Harry. If you think I'm going to let anything slip through these walls, you don't know me at all." Her words left no room for argument. Together, they spent the next few days reinforcing every corner of Grimald Place. Hermione drew intricate runes along the window frames, charms that would alert them to any magical tampering. Harry focused on the perimeter, weaving protective spells that would make intruders regret even approaching the property. It was exhausting work, but at the end of each day, when Hermione leaned against him with a tired but satisfied smile, Harry felt a fierce pride in the life they were building. Despite the growing shadows, there were moments of light. Ron visited, awkward but genuine, carrying a small stuffed dragon he had bought from a shop in Diagon Alley. He held it out, scratching his neck. "For the kid," he muttered. Hermione's eyes softened. "Thank you, Ron. That's lovely." Harry grinned, clapping him on the shoulder. "You're going to spoil them." Ron shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. Better spoiled than bored. Their friendship had been strained, but slowly, visit by visit, the old warmth began to return. Harry knew it would never be quite the same as before, but it was something, and that mattered. The baby's arrival loomed closer with every week. Hermione's movements grew slower, her exhaustion deeper, but she carried herself with a determination Harry both admired and worried about. She refused to stop reading, refused to stop planning, even when he urged her to rest. One quiet night, as rain tapped gently against the windows, Harry woke to find her sitting up in bed, hand pressed to her stomach, a faraway look in her eyes. "What is it?" he asked softly, reaching for her hand. "The baby," she whispered. "They're so strong tonight. I can feel every turn." Harry placed his palm over hers, and sure enough, a series of sharp kicks rippled against his hand. His heart swelled. "Blimey," he murmured, grinning. "That's our little fighter." Hermione leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "Sometimes I wonder, do you think we'll be good enough? With all the history, with everything that follows us." Harry's smile faded, and he tightened his arm around her. "I used to wonder the same thing. But then I think about how we've survived everything together. How we've always chosen to stand, even when it nearly broke us. If we can do that, Hermione, then we can raise a child who knows love, no matter what else happens." She closed her eyes, letting his words sink in. For a few minutes, they stayed like that, listening to the storm outside, listening to the steady rhythm of their unborn child. The peace didn't last. 2 days later, Harry returned from the Auror office with grim news. "There's been movement," he told Hermione as he shut the front door, his voice low. A group of suspected Death Eater loyalists were spotted in Nocturne Alley. "The department is worried they're reorganizing." Hermione's face paled. "Do they know about us?" Harry hesitated. "There's no proof. But the letter. I can't ignore the possibility." She pressed her lips together, her hand instinctively drifting to her stomach. "Then we prepare even more. I'll draft emergency charms. If something happens before the birth, we'll have to be ready to leave quickly." Harry wanted to argue, wanted to insist that he would stop anything before it touched them. But deep down, he knew Hermione was right. There were too many unknowns. That night, long after Hermione had fallen into an uneasy sleep, Harry sat awake in the nursery. The rocking chair creaked softly as he moved back and forth, staring at the cradle. His mind churned with fears he couldn't voice. He thought about the hooded figure, the letter, the possibility of war rising again. But then he thought about the baby's kicks, Hermione's determined smile, the home they were building. He whispered into the quiet room, "I'll keep you safe. Both of you. No matter what it takes." Unseen, a faint shimmer flickered across the edge of the wards Hermione had placed on the windows. The house held firm, but somewhere out there, someone was testing its strength. The game had already begun. The days grew heavier as spring edged toward summer. Hermione's due date was now close enough that every twinge or sudden tightening in her body made Harry spring to his feet, half expecting their child to arrive. But even as they waited for that moment of joy, the shadow of danger pressed closer. Harry began noticing signs around the city that made his stomach twist. A flicker of movement when he turned down a street, the same hooded figure lingering near Diagon Alley twice in a week, and once, while leaving the apothecary, he could swear he heard the faint hiss of Parseltongue whispered through the air before vanishing into silence. He told himself he was imagining things, nerves stretched thin by anticipation, but deep down he knew the truth. Someone was circling them. Someone was testing the edges of their safety. Hermione noticed too. Her normally steady hands shook when she brewed her calming teas, and she began checking the wards 3, sometimes 4 times a day. Harry tried to reassure her, but she wasn't a woman who could be soothed with vague promises. She wanted answers, concrete and undeniable, and Harry had none to give. Their friends began to rally quietly. Neville dropped by more often, sometimes staying the night under the guise of company, but really serving as an extra pair of eyes. Ron, awkward as ever, started sending packages of baby clothes along with enchanted toys that lit up and twirled. Hermione scolded him for spoiling the child before it was even born, but Harry saw the gesture for what it was: Ron's way of showing loyalty when words failed. It was Ginny who surprised Harry most. She appeared at Grimald Place one afternoon unannounced, her red hair damp from the rain. "You don't have to say anything," she told him firmly before he could speak. "I know something's going on. I know the signs. And if you think I'll stand back while my family, yes, you and Hermione, are threatened, you're mad." Hermione, who had joined them in the hall, gave her a tired but grateful smile. "We could use all the help we can get." The days that followed felt like the edge of a storm. Hermione's contractions began sporadically, small flares that came and went without warning, leaving her pale and restless. Healers reassured them it was normal, that the baby would come when ready, but Harry felt like the walls themselves were tightening in rhythm with Hermione's body. One evening, Hermione woke with a sharp gasp, clutching Harry's arm. "It's time," she whispered, her voice tight. Harry's heart leapt, panic and joy flooding him all at once. He sent a Patronus racing to St. Mungo's, and within minutes Neville and Ginny were at the house, ready to help them travel. Hermione leaned against Harry, sweat beading her forehead, but her eyes were fierce. "I'm not afraid," she told him through gritted teeth as he held her steady. "I know," Harry whispered back, his throat thick. "But I am." The journey to St. Mungo's was a blur. Every step Hermione took felt like a thunderclap in Harry's chest. The healers swept them into a private ward, assuring Harry he could stay by her side. He gripped her hand as though letting go would mean losing everything. Hours passed in a haze of pain and determination. Hermione bore it with a strength Harry could scarcely comprehend. He whispered encouragements, wiped her brow, held her hand through every wave. At one point, when she nearly crushed his fingers with her grip, she hissed, "You did this to me, Potter." Even through his terror, Harry managed a strangled laugh. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the cry of their child split the air. Harry's breath caught as the healer lifted the small, wriggling figure into Hermione's arms. A baby girl. Hermione wept openly, her face flushed, her arms trembling as she held the tiny bundle close. Harry leaned in, his eyes blurred with tears. "She's perfect," he whispered. Their daughter blinked up at them, her eyes dark but curious, her little hands reaching instinctively for the warmth of their touch. In that moment, the world outside, threats, letters, shadows, ceased to matter. All Harry saw was Hermione's tired but radiant face and the miracle they had created together. But the world never stayed silent for long. As they rested, their daughter cradled safely in Hermione's arms, Harry felt a faint vibration through the warding stone he had tucked into his pocket. The wards at Grimald Place had been disturbed. Someone had tested them again. Harry stared at his wife and child, his chest tightening with both love and fear. The storm was coming closer, but now he had more to protect than ever before. And he would not fail them. The ward at St. Mungo's muffled the sounds of the outside world, making the room feel like a fragile bubble of peace. Hermione lay propped up against soft pillows, her hair damp with sweat but her face glowing with a quiet, unshakable joy. Their daughter slept in the cradle beside the bed, wrapped in a blanket so small Harry could scarcely believe a human could fit inside it. For hours, Harry sat beside them, unable to look away. He had faced dragons, dementors, even Voldemort himself, but nothing had terrified him like the moment Hermione went into labor. And nothing had ever filled him with such overwhelming awe as the sound of his daughter's first cry. "We did it," Hermione whispered hoarsely, her fingers brushing over the baby's cheek. Harry leaned forward, brushing his lips against Hermione's temple. "You did it. I just tried not to faint." Hermione gave him a tired laugh, her eyes closing. She drifted into sleep quickly, exhaustion pulling her under, but Harry remained awake, watching over both of them. Every so often, he glanced toward the small warding stone in his pocket, remembering the faint tremor he had felt during the birth. Someone had been testing their defenses. But not here. Not now. The healers gave them a few days of quiet recovery before discharging them. Ron visited with his awkward grin and a box of sweets from Honeydukes, muttering about how he had no idea what babies liked. Ginny brought a knitted blanket in Gryffindor colors, and Neville delivered a plant from the greenhouses that would purify the air around the cradle. Each gift made Hermione's eyes shine with gratitude. They named her Rose Lily Potter. Rose for the hope of something new and beautiful, and Lily for Harry's mother, whose love still lingered in every choice he made. The first nights at Grimald Place were a blur of feedings, wails, and bleary-eyed rocking. Harry had thought he knew exhaustion, but the war had never demanded this sort of endless vigilance. He rose at every sound, terrified something might be wrong. Hermione, despite her tiredness, moved with a calm precision that astonished him. She whispered softly to Rose, humming as she fed her, her eyes glowing in the dim candlelight. One evening, as Rose finally drifted into sleep, Harry pulled Hermione into his arms. She leaned against him, her body still frail but her spirit unyielding. "She's going to change everything," Hermione murmured. "She already has," Harry said. But peace remained fragile. Twice in the first week, Harry caught flickers of movement near the edge of the street outside Grimald Place. Once, when he peered through the enchanted window, he swore he saw the glint of pale green light before it vanished. He said nothing to Hermione at first, not wanting to mar her moments of happiness, but she noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way he carried his wand always within reach. Finally, one night, as she rocked Rose in her arms, Hermione said, "You feel it too, don't you?" Harry sat across from her, rubbing his temples. "Yes. The wards are holding, but they're being tested. Whoever it is, they're patient. Careful." Hermione's gaze sharpened. "That means they're planning something. And we can't just wait for it to come to us." Harry wanted to argue, to insist that her recovery and Rose's safety were more important than strategies and countermeasures, but he knew better. Hermione had fought beside him through everything. She wasn't about to stop now, not when their child's future was at stake. "We'll bring in Kingsley," Harry said finally. "He needs to know. If loyalists are regrouping, the ministry has to be ready." Hermione nodded, satisfied, though worry still lingered in her eyes. The following day, Harry made the visit to the ministry. Kingsley listened intently as Harry described the disturbances and showed him the letter. The minister's face grew grave. "You were right to keep this quiet from the press," Kingsley said. "If word spreads that Death Eater remnants are organizing again, panic will undo everything we've rebuilt. But I'll put eyes on Nocturne Alley. And Harry, watch your back. They won't come for you directly. They'll come for what you love." Harry returned home with the warning echoing in his mind. When he stepped into the nursery, he saw Hermione asleep in the rocking chair, Rose nestled safely in her arms. The sight pierced him, so delicate, so perfect, so utterly vulnerable. He vowed again that no shadow, no remnant of Voldemort's madness, would ever touch them. But outside Grimald Place, unseen in the dim alleys of London, a hooded figure whispered to another. "They've named the child," the first voice said, low and cold. "Rose Lily Potter." The second voice hissed in reply. "Then the legacy continues. And legacies can be broken." The days blurred into nights, and the nights into days. Rose's cries filled Grimald Place with a new rhythm, one that left Harry and Hermione exhausted but strangely exhilarated. The house that had once been filled with silence and shadows now pulsed with life. Every corner seemed warmer, brighter, touched by the presence of their daughter. Hermione adjusted to motherhood with the same methodical care she applied to everything. She tracked Rose's feeding times on parchment, charmed quills to take notes automatically when her hands were full, and had even enchanted the nursery to hum soft lullabies when Rose stirred in the night. Harry teased her about turning parenting into a revision schedule, but secretly he admired her brilliance. Harry, on the other hand, approached fatherhood with instinct. He sang badly, paced the halls in long circles with Rose against his chest, and told her stories of Quidditch matches and adventures she couldn't yet understand. She didn't care about the words. She listened to the sound of his voice, settling against him with tiny sighs. One evening, after a particularly long day of crying spells, Hermione watched as Harry finally coaxed Rose into sleep by gently rocking her near the fireplace. His green eyes glowed in the firelight, his face softened in a way Hermione had rarely seen. "You're a natural," she whispered, her voice thick with affection. Harry glanced at her, shaking his head with a laugh. "I have no idea what I'm doing." "You're doing everything right," Hermione said firmly. "She already adores you." It was true. Rose seemed to calm most quickly in Harry's arms, her little fists gripping at his robes as if she knew instinctively that he would never let her go. For a brief stretch of weeks, it almost felt like the threats outside did not exist. Their world shrank to late-night feedings, baby laughter, and the small victories of parenthood. Even Ron, though hopeless with infants, managed to make Rose smile by making ridiculous faces, which he claimed was proof of his natural charm. But the unease lingered at the edges. Harry still caught flashes of movement near the house, still felt the wards shudder as though touched by probing hands. He didn't always tell Hermione. She needed rest, not more worries, but she was too sharp to miss the tension in him. One night, after Rose had finally gone down in her cradle, Hermione caught Harry staring at the window, wand gripped tight in his hand. "You saw something again," she said softly. Harry hesitated, then nodded. "Just a shadow. But it was there." Hermione crossed the room, laying her hand on his. "You can't carry this alone. If they're planning something, we have to face it together." Harry kissed her forehead, drawing strength from her calm. "I know. I just wish we had more time before it reached us." As if in answer, Rose stirred in her cradle and let out a soft cry. Hermione bent to scoop her up, rocking her gently. Harry watched them, his chest tightening with both love and dread. Kingsley's words haunted him. "They won't come for you directly. They'll come for what you love." That night, Harry dreamed of shadows creeping through the nursery, of Rose crying out as green light filled the room. He woke drenched in sweat, his wand in his hand, before he even realized he had moved. Hermione stirred beside him, whispering his name, but he couldn't shake the image. The next morning, he made a decision. He sent letters to Neville, Ginny, and Ron, asking them to form a watch. If the remnants of Voldemort's followers were gathering strength, Harry would not wait idly. When his friends arrived, they agreed without hesitation. Neville set protective plants in the garden that would scream if touched. Ginny charmed the front steps to alert them to any intruders. Ron, though grumbling about complicated runes, helped Hermione etch new defensive wards into the stone. Grimald Place became more than a home. It became a fortress disguised as a family house. Hermione, rocking Rose in her arms, watched their friends work with a mix of gratitude and unease. "Do you think we're overreacting?" she asked quietly. Harry shook his head. "I think we're finally ready. And not a moment too soon." Late one evening, as the household settled into uneasy rest, the wards shivered violently, louder and sharper than ever before. The alarms Neville had planted screeched like banshees in the night. Harry was on his feet instantly, wand raised, as Rose wailed in her cradle. Hermione rushed to her side, clutching her close as the entire house seemed to tense under the strain. This time, it wasn't a test. Someone was trying to break in. The wards pulsed with a sound like cracking glass, vibrating through the walls of Grimald Place. Every portrait rattled, the floorboards creaked under invisible strain, and the protective charms Hermione had etched across the entryway flared with sudden white light. The alarm shrieked so loudly it pierced through every room, causing Rose to cry with a desperate, terrified wail. Harry moved quickly, his training taking over. He grabbed his cloak from the chair and cast a silencing charm around the nursery, so Rose's cries would not carry through the house. Hermione, clutching their daughter tightly, looked up at him with fierce determination. "You can't face this alone," she said, her voice low but unwavering. "I won't," Harry replied, and he wasn't lying. Already footsteps thundered down the hallway, Ron and Ginny, wands drawn, faces set. Neville followed moments later, his sleeves rolled to the elbows, his wand glowing with a spell that made the air around him ripple. The four of them gathered in the parlor, the heart of the house, where the protective magic converged. The wards shimmered as shadows pressed against them from outside, bending the enchantments as if testing for weakness. A chill swept through the room, and Harry felt it in his scar, not pain, but something colder, a memory of dread that had haunted him since childhood. "They're not just testing anymore," Neville said grimly. "They're forcing their way in." Hermione appeared behind them, Rose tucked against her chest, her wand held steadily in her free hand. Harry turned on instinct. "You need to stay back with Rose. If anything happens, take her and get out. Apparate, don't wait for us." "I won't leave you," Hermione said sharply. Her eyes burned with resolve. "Not this time. Not ever." For a moment Harry wanted to argue, but there was no time. The ward screamed again, then shattered with a sound like thunder. The front door blasted inward, splinters of wood flying like shrapnel. Figures in black cloaks surged through the threshold, masks covering their faces, wands raised. "Death Eaters," Ron snarled, leveling his wand. Spells erupted instantly, filling the parlor with blinding flashes of red, green, and blue. Harry ducked behind the edge of the staircase, firing back a stunner that sent the first intruder crashing against the wall. Ginny's hexes came sharp and precise, knocking another off his feet, while Neville unleashed vines that wrapped around a masked figure and dragged him to the floor. But there were too many. They came in waves, forcing their way deeper into the house, shouting curses that rattled against the walls. Harry fought with a ferocity born of fear. Every spell he cast was faster than the last, his body moving almost without thought. He wasn't fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for Hermione, for Rose, for the family he had sworn to protect. One Death Eater broke through the chaos, rushing toward Hermione. Harry's heart stopped, but Hermione raised her wand, her voice steady even as she shifted Rose to her other arm. "Expelliarmus," she shouted. The masked intruder's wand flew from his hand, clattering against the far wall. Hermione followed with a full-body bind, and the man crashed to the ground, motionless. Rose, though still crying, quieted slightly against her mother's chest, as if sensing her strength. For a few frantic minutes, it seemed they might hold the line. The intruders fell one by one, some stunned, others bound by Neville's relentless magic. But then the air shifted again. A deeper, heavier presence filled the doorway. The remaining Death Eaters parted to let another figure step forward. He was cloaked in black, his mask different from the others, silver, gleaming, etched with cruel lines. He didn't need to speak for Harry to know he was their leader. "Potter," the figure drawled, his voice cold and deliberate. "Always in the way." Harry's grip tightened on his wand. "And always standing between you and anyone you want to hurt." The figure tilted his head, studying Hermione, then Rose, who whimpered softly in her mother's arms. "So it's true. The great Harry Potter has a family now. Vulnerable. Precious. Easy to break." Harry felt something ignite inside him, a fire sharper than fear. "You won't touch them." The leader raised his wand lazily. "Let us see." With a flick, he unleashed a curse unlike any Harry had seen before, a swirling mass of black fire that hissed and screamed as it tore through the air. Harry moved instinctively, casting a shield charm so powerful it rattled every window in the house. The impact threw him back a step, but the curse dissolved into sparks before it could reach Hermione or Rose. Ron shouted, firing a jinx that clipped the edge of the silver mask, revealing a scarred mouth twisted into a cruel grin. "Next time, Weasley," the man sneered, before casting another curse that split the floorboards at their feet. The battle raged on, spells ricocheting off the walls, filling the house with smoke and heat. Harry felt the old pull of destiny, the sense that this wasn't just another fight. Whoever this masked man was, he wasn't like the others. He was something new, something dangerous. But before Harry could press the attack, the man raised his wand high and shouted a word Harry didn't recognize. A violent shockwave burst through the house, knocking everyone off their feet. The intruders retreated into the smoke, dragging their fallen comrades with them. When the haze cleared, the silver-masked man was gone. Silence fell over Grimald Place, broken only by Rose's renewed cries. Hermione held her tighter, whispering soothing words. Harry pulled himself to his feet, his breath ragged, his wand still clutched tightly. He exchanged a look with Ron, then Neville, then Ginny. None of them had answers. Only fear. But Harry knew one thing. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The smoke clung to the air long after the intruders vanished, leaving Grimald Place trembling as though it too had felt the violence of the night. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating, broken only by Rose's cries echoing faintly from Hermione's arms. Harry stood in the parlor, his wand still raised though there was no longer anyone to fight. His heart pounded so violently it seemed to shake his chest. He had faced countless battles, had fought Voldemort himself, but tonight felt different. Tonight had been personal. The silver-masked man had looked directly at Hermione and Rose, and in that instant Harry understood what Kingsley had meant months ago. His enemies would go for what he loved most. Hermione lowered herself into a chair, rocking Rose with trembling arms. The adrenaline that had fueled her through the fight was wearing off, and Harry could see the fear behind her determined eyes. "Are you both all right?" he asked quickly, crouching beside them. Hermione nodded, though her voice wavered when she spoke. "She's fine. Scared, but fine. I never want her to hear that sound again. That house full of curses and screams." Harry pressed his forehead against Rose's tiny head, inhaling the comforting scent of her hair. "She won't. I promise." But even as he spoke, doubt gnawed at him. Ron groaned from across the room, pushing himself upright. "Blimey, mate. Whoever that was, he wasn't some leftover follower. He knew what he was doing." Ginny wiped soot from her cheek, her eyes sharp. "And he knew exactly where to strike. Right here, right now. This wasn't random." Neville leaned against the ruined doorframe, wand still in his hand. His expression was grim. "That leader. I felt something in his magic. It wasn't just hate, it was controlled. Precise. He's been planning this for a long time." Harry rose, his mind spinning. He had to know who that man was. The scars on his mouth, the way he carried himself, the confidence in his spells. None of it matched the Death Eaters he had fought before. This was someone new, someone who had stepped into the void Voldemort left behind. But Harry could not admit how deeply that unsettled him, not while Hermione was watching. "We'll find out who he is," Harry said firmly. "And when we do, we'll stop him." Hermione's gaze hardened. "We have to, Harry." He looked at Rose like she was a weakness he could use against us. "I won't let her grow up with that kind of threat hanging over her." The friends set to work through the night, repairing the damage as best they could. Neville reinforced the wards with plants that pulsed faintly, alive and watchful. Ginny strengthened the perimeter charms. Ron grumbled, but helped Harry piece the door back together with makeshift spells. But Harry noticed something as they worked. Every few minutes Hermione would pause, clutching Rose just a little tighter, her eyes darting to the shadows as though expecting the silver mask to appear again. By dawn, the house was secure again, though scarred. The wards shimmered faintly, stronger than ever, but Harry knew they wouldn't be enough forever. That morning, Kingsley arrived, summoned by Ginny's urgent Patronus. The minister listened quietly as they explained what had happened, his jaw tightening with every word. "A silver mask," Kingsley repeated when they finished. "Scarred mouth. Powerful magic." He exhaled slowly. "I feared this might happen." Hermione's head snapped up. "You know who he is?" Kingsley hesitated, then gave a weary nod. "Not by name, but we've had whispers in the ministry. Rumors of a man rallying the remnants of Voldemort's followers, forging them into something new. They call him the Heir of Shadows. No one knows if that's truth or invention, but he's been building strength quietly, waiting for the right moment. If he's here now, it means he believes he's ready." Harry clenched his fists. "Ready for what? Another war?" Kingsley met his gaze. "Perhaps. Or perhaps something worse. Voldemort sought power for himself. But this one is said to want revenge. To finish what was left undone." The words hung in the air like a curse. That night, after everyone else had gone, Harry sat in the nursery, watching Rose sleep in her cradle. The soft glow of a protection charm shimmered over her like a blanket of light. Hermione appeared in the doorway, silent, her hair loose around her tired face. "You should rest," she said softly. "I can't," Harry admitted. His eyes stayed fixed on Rose. "Every time I close my eyes I see him. That mask. That look. What if I can't protect her, Hermione? What if he takes everything from us?" Hermione crossed the room and sank onto the chair beside him, laying her hand on his. "Harry, listen to me. You faced worse. You fought darkness that no one thought could be beaten, and you won. You're not alone this time. You have me, you have our friends, you have her. She's our reason to fight harder than ever." Harry turned to look at her, the firelight catching in her determined eyes. "She's our future," Hermione whispered, her gaze falling to Rose. "And no one is going to take her from us." Harry wanted to believe that. He had to, because if the Heir of Shadows had marked their family, then the war they thought was over had only just begun. The days following the attack blurred together in a haze of exhaustion, unease, and restless preparation. Grimald Place no longer felt like a home. It felt like a fortress under siege, its walls humming with wards, its windows sealed with layers of enchantments. Every creak in the floorboards set Harry on edge. Every gust of wind against the shutters made Hermione's hand tighten around her wand. But through it all, Rose was the center that held them steady. Her innocent laughter in the mornings, the way her tiny hands curled around their fingers, the warmth of her sleeping breath against Hermione's shoulder. These moments reminded them of what they were fighting for. Still, neither Harry nor Hermione could escape the lingering shadow of the silver-masked man. The memory of his cold voice and the cruel glint in his eyes haunted them both. Hermione tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, insisting they keep a routine. She read aloud from children's books, even though Rose was too young to understand. She brewed calming drafts to help with the baby's restless nights, and even began writing notes on strengthening defensive spells, filling parchment after parchment in her precise script. Harry, meanwhile, spent long hours pacing the house, wand in hand, practicing dueling spells against invisible foes. He knew that when the silver mask returned, and it was a question of when, not if, he would have to be faster, sharper, more ruthless. He had defeated Voldemort, but something about this new enemy unsettled him more deeply. Voldemort had been predictable in his obsession with power and immortality. The Heir of Shadows, if that was truly his name, felt unpredictable, patient, cunning. One evening, Kingsley returned, this time with parchment rolls tucked under his arm. He sat with Harry and Hermione in the parlor, while Rose dozed in her cradle, the faint crackle of the fire filling the silence. "I've been digging," Kingsley said, unrolling the parchments. "The Ministry has little concrete information, but enough fragments to begin forming a picture. There are whispers of a man who was once a loyal follower of Voldemort, but operated in the shadows. Not one of the inner circle, not branded with the dark mark, but someone who believed Voldemort's downfall was only temporary. He never sought recognition, only influence. It is said he spent years gathering knowledge of old, forbidden magic." Hermione leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "So he stayed hidden while the others fell. That explains why we never saw him during the war. He was waiting." Kingsley nodded gravely. "Some accounts suggest he was obsessed with bloodlines, particularly those tied to powerful magical families. The silver mask he wears, it's more than a disguise. It's a symbol. His followers believe it marks him as the heir to the unfinished legacy of Voldemort. Whether or not that's true doesn't matter. What matters is that they believe it." Harry's fists clenched on the arm of his chair. "He came here. To my home. To my family. This isn't just about Voldemort's legacy, it's about me. He wants to finish what Voldemort started." Hermione's voice shook slightly, though her expression remained steady. "And he'll see Rose as part of that. He'll see her as a way to hurt us." Kingsley's gaze softened. "That's why I came tonight. I'm placing protective orders on your family. Oris will rotate in secret around Grimald Place, disguised and unseen. You won't be alone in this." Harry felt a flicker of gratitude, but it was buried under the weight of determination. "I won't just hide behind Ministry guards, Kingsley. If he wants me, I'll face him. I won't wait for him to strike again." Kingsley sighed. "I expected nothing less. But Harry, promise me one thing. Don't lose sight of what matters. Voldemort nearly broke you because he forced you to carry the fight alone. Don't let history repeat itself." That night, after Kingsley left, Hermione found Harry in the nursery, standing over Rose's cradle again. The baby stirred slightly, stretching in her sleep before curling back into slumber. "You're thinking of him again," Hermione said quietly, moving to stand beside him. Harry nodded. "I can't stop. He's out there, Hermione. And he knows about her. That mask. I'll never forget the way he looked at you both." Hermione slipped her hand into his. "Then don't forget something else, Harry. We've faced worse before. Not alone. Together. That's how we'll win this time, too." Harry squeezed her hand, his chest tightening with both fear and love. "Together," he repeated, almost like a vow. But as the candles flickered low, Harry knew that their lives would never return to the quiet peace they had imagined after the war. The Heir of Shadows had marked them, and the battle for their daughter's future had only just begun. Far from the safety of Grimald Place, deep within a crumbling manor hidden in the English countryside, the man in the silver mask stood before a gathering of cloaked figures. The room was lit only by torchlight, shadows stretching across cracked stone walls. The air was heavy with smoke, thick with the scent of burning incense that masked the damp rot of the place. The followers bowed low before him, murmuring pledges of loyalty. Their voices echoed like a chant, a reminder that while Voldemort's reign had ended, darkness had not died with him. The silver-masked man raised a gloved hand, silencing them instantly. His voice, smooth and deliberate, carried across the chamber. "You saw what was done," he said. "You saw how the wards of Harry Potter's sanctuary crumbled before my will. You saw how his allies scurried to defend him, like frightened vermin clinging to the last scraps of hope. They call him the Chosen One, the boy who lived, the savior. But I saw the truth in his eyes that night. He is not untouchable. He is vulnerable. And more importantly, he has something to lose." A ripple of murmurs spread among the cloaked figures. One of them, his mask plain and unmarked, raised his head. "Master, he has faced greater foes than us. He has defeated the Dark Lord himself. Should we not fear his strength?" The silver mask tilted, catching the torchlight. "Strength?" His voice curled with contempt. Voldemort's downfall was his arrogance. He sought to rule through terror, through brute force, but he underestimated what drives a man to fight. Harry Potter was a boy with nothing, yet he fought like one with everything to gain. But now, he paused, his gaze drifting to the far corner of the room where a small table stood. On it lay scattered parchments, sketches, and fragments of old magical texts, each marked with his careful notes. Among them was a crude drawing of Grimald Place, and beside it, a smaller sketch, a child, no more than a babe, held in the arms of a woman with wild curls. "Now he has everything to lose," the masked man continued. "A wife, a child, a fragile illusion of peace. Love is the chain that binds him, and it is the very thing that will break him." The followers shifted uneasily, though none dared speak against him. His words were too sharp, too certain, carrying the weight of conviction that could turn doubt into obedience. He stepped closer to the table, his gloved hand brushing over the parchment of the child. "They call me the Heir of Shadows. I do not claim Voldemort's blood, nor his legacy. I claim what he failed to take. He sought dominion over death, but he did not understand that true power lies in shaping fear, in controlling not the dead, but the living. I will succeed where he failed. Not through arrogance, through patience, through precision." Another follower knelt. "Master, what of the ministry? They will defend Potter as they always have. Kingsley is not blind to your presence." The silver mask tilted again, this time in amusement. "The ministry? A beast crippled by its own bureaucracy. They chase whispers while I weave truths into shadows. By the time they understand what I have built, it will already be too late." He turned back toward his followers, his voice low but burning with intensity. "Harry Potter will learn what it means to fight not for survival, but for love. He will learn that love is not his strength, it is his weakness. And when he falls, the wizarding world will see him not as a savior, but as a man broken by the weight of what he could not protect." The followers bowed deeper, their chants rising again in the flickering torchlight. The masked man closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the power of their voices echo through the chamber. But behind the mask, his thoughts were sharper, colder. He remembered the way Hermione had stood, child in arms, casting spells with steady precision. He remembered the fire in Harry's eyes as he shielded them both. He whispered to himself, so quietly that none of the followers could hear. "Yes, break the man by breaking the family." The fall of Harry Potter begins with the cries of his child. The torches flared, and the chamber filled with the sound of devotion. The Heir of Shadows stood tall, patient and calculating, already weaving the next thread in his plan. Back at Grimald Place, Harry Potter stirred from uneasy sleep, unaware that his enemy was not only preparing for war, but was already holding his family at the center of his dark design. Morning light streamed weakly through the curtains of Grimald Place, but it did little to soften the tension that had settled in the house. The memory of the attack lingered like smoke in the walls, and even the simplest tasks, feeding Rose, tidying the kitchen, sitting down to tea, were tinged with unease. Harry woke early, his body restless, his mind sharper than it had been in years. He had survived a war, but this was different. This time, he wasn't just fighting for himself. He wasn't even just fighting for the wizarding world. He was fighting for Hermione and Rose. That reality made every movement feel urgent. When Hermione emerged from the nursery, Cradling their still sleepy daughter, she found Harry clearing the parlor. The chairs had been pushed against the walls, the rug rolled up, leaving an open space in the center. His wand was in hand, his expression hard. "You're already up," she said softly. Harry turned toward her, his eyes resolute. "We have to be ready. Next time, they'll come stronger. I can't risk being caught off guard again." Hermione adjusted Rose against her shoulder, studying him carefully. "Harry, you can't fight them all by yourself." "I won't," Harry replied, though his voice carried a stubborn edge. "But I need to be faster. Stronger. Every spell counts when it's her life on the line." Hermione watched him for a long moment, then finally nodded. "Then we'll train together." Ron arrived later that morning, bringing with him a trunk filled with dueling dummies borrowed from the Auror office. Ginny and Neville followed shortly after, their faces set with determination. None of them needed convincing. They had fought beside Harry once before, and they would do so again without hesitation. The parlor became their training ground. Neville conjured barriers of living vines that acted as moving shields. Ginny darted back and forth, casting hexes that forced Harry to react quickly. Ron, unrelenting, threw curse after curse, testing Harry's defenses with every strike. Hermione joined in when she could, passing Rose carefully to Ginny between rounds. Her spells were precise and efficient, each one honed from years of disciplined practice. When she and Harry sparred together, their movements flowed in a rhythm, each anticipating the other's next step as though they had been fighting side by side all their lives. By midday, the house rang with the sound of spells striking wards, dummies collapsing under hexes, and the heavy breaths of friends pushing themselves to their limits. Rose watched from her cradle, wide-eyed, occasionally letting out delighted giggles when sparks of magic lit the air. But in the quiet moments between drills, Hermione's worry surfaced. She sat with Harry during a short break, wiping sweat from her brow. "You're pushing yourself too hard," she murmured. "You haven't even eaten." Harry shook his head. "I can't stop. I keep seeing him, Hermione. That mask. That curse. If I'd been slower, if my shield had failed." Hermione reached out, gripping his hand tightly. "But it didn't. You were strong enough. You've always been strong enough." She paused, her voice softening. "But Harry, strength isn't only about casting faster spells. It's about trusting others to fight with you. You don't have to carry this alone." He met her gaze, the weight of her words pressing against the stubborn fire inside him. Slowly he nodded. "You're right. She's so small, Hermione. So helpless. I can't stand the thought of him getting near her." Hermione's eyes glistened, but her grip on his hand didn't waver. "That's why we'll fight. Together." That evening, as the sun dipped low and the house finally quieted, Harry found himself once again in the nursery. Rose was sleeping peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. Harry leaned over the cradle, brushing a soft kiss against her forehead. "You'll never know the world I grew up in," he whispered. "I'll make sure of it. You'll grow up safe. You'll grow up free. I promise." But promises were fragile things. Somewhere in the shadows beyond Grimald Place, the Silver Mask watched and waited, his patience unbroken. The heir of shadows had been thwarted once, but he would not stop. And Harry knew, deep down, that their next clash would not be one they could walk away from unscathed. The next few days settled into a tense rhythm within Grimald Place. Training in the mornings, research in the afternoons, and nights spent keeping watch as though danger lurked just outside the wards. The friends took turns guarding, though Harry often found himself pacing the corridors when it wasn't his shift, unable to silence the restless energy that had taken root inside him. Hermione threw herself into research, combing through every book that might hold a clue. She scoured ministry records, restricted sections of the Hogwarts library through magical correspondence, and even cracked open the dust-covered volumes from the Black family shelves. None of them offered a clear answer, but a pattern began to emerge. Whispers of a group of Death Eaters who had vanished after Voldemort's fall, led by someone whose name was carefully hidden in every account. Meanwhile, far from Grimald Place, the heir of shadows was making his own plans. In a dimly lit chamber beneath a ruined manor, a figure in silver mask stood before a gathering of cloaked followers. The room hummed with dark enchantments, the air thick with tension. "They underestimate us," the heir said, his voice sharp and deliberate. They believed the war ended with the fall of the Dark Lord. But Voldemort was only the beginning. His vision lacked what I can provide: patience, strategy, and the will to finish what he could not. A murmur of agreement spread through the crowd. The masked figure raised his wand, conjuring an image in the air, a vision of Harry Potter, Hermione Granger, and their child. The sight of the infant sent shivers through the gathering. This child, he continued, his tone dripping with disdain, represents everything we despise. A world where bloodlines blur, where power is diluted, where weakness is celebrated. She is the symbol of their so-called future. His wand slashed downward, and the vision shattered like glass. We will destroy that future. Back at Grimald Place, Harry stood with Ron in the kitchen, staring at the parchment Hermione had spread out before them. These records are incomplete, Hermione explained, her brow furrowed. Names blacked out, entire families erased from the archives. Someone went to great lengths to hide them. Ron leaned over, squinting at the blurred ink. So what you're saying is, there's a whole group out there we know nothing about. Not nothing, Hermione said, her eyes flickering with determination. Enough to know they exist. Enough to know they're organized. And enough to know they've chosen now to resurface. Harry's jaw tightened. And their leader, the masked one, we still don't know who he is. No, Hermione admitted, her voice low. But I think he's connected to Voldemort's old circle. Not a simple follower. Someone who wants more than revenge. The thought gnawed at Harry. The mask, the precision of the attack, the deliberate targeting of his family. It all suggested someone who understood his strengths and weaknesses. Someone who wasn't afraid of him. That night, as Hermione finally coaxed Rose into sleep, Harry stood by the window, staring out at the starless sky. He could almost feel the weight of unseen eyes pressing against the wards, testing for cracks. The unease settled heavy in his chest. Neville approached quietly, carrying 2 mugs of tea. "You're thinking too much," he said, handing one to Harry. Harry accepted it, though he barely tasted the warmth. "I'm trying to think like him. If I wanted to hurt me, where would I strike next?" Neville sipped his tea thoughtfully. "If he's clever, he'll avoid coming straight at you again. He'll go after something else. Someone else. He'll want you off balance." Harry's stomach turned at the thought. The Weasleys. The Longbottoms. Their friends who had already sacrificed too much. He clenched the mug in his hand, forcing himself to stay calm. "Then we have to be ready everywhere. No one is safe." In the nursery, Hermione hummed softly, her voice carrying through the hall as Rose settled into sleep. Harry closed his eyes at the sound, letting it steady him. But far away in the ruined manor, the heir of shadows had already chosen his next move. His followers spread maps across the table, marking villages, schools, and ministry outposts. His masked face tilted toward one location in particular, and a cold smile formed beneath the silver. "Their strength lies in unity," he said. "So we will shatter it. We will take from them not by striking Potter directly, but by striking at the world he protects." The room stirred with anticipation as he raised his wand high, shadows curling around him like living things. The war begins anew. The following morning began with a rare moment of quiet at Grimald Place. Hermione sat at the long table with Rose balanced on her lap, feeding her mashed fruit while Ginny busied herself preparing breakfast. Ron and Neville argued over a chessboard nearby, their voices filling the air with a normalcy that felt almost foreign. Harry stood apart from them, leaning against the doorway, arms folded. His eyes never strayed far from the window, scanning the empty street beyond the protective wards. He wanted to enjoy this moment, but something gnawed at him, a pull deep in his gut that refused to ease. Hermione noticed. "You haven't sat down once," she said quietly. Harry shook his head. "It's too still. Too quiet." Before Hermione could answer, an owl tapped frantically against the glass. Ginny opened the window, and the bird swooped inside, dropping a sealed letter onto the table. The parchment was marked with the ministry's crest, but the hurried scrawl across the front made Harry's chest tighten. Hermione unfolded it quickly, her face paling as she read aloud. "Attack at Ottery St. Catchpole. Multiple homes destroyed. Ministry Oris dispatched." Ron shot up from his chair, his voice cracking. "That's the Burrow," Harry finished, his voice sharp with dread. They moved instantly. Hermione thrust Rose into Ginny's arms, her expression torn between fear and resolve. Stay here with her. Don't leave the wards. No matter what. Ginny nodded firmly, clutching the baby close. Go. Bring them back. Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Neville operate directly outside the village. Smoke choked the air, rising in dark plumes against the morning sky. Flames licked the remains of houses, and cries echoed through the chaos as terrified villagers scrambled to safety. Spells crackled in the distance, the clash of curses unmistakable. They sprinted toward the Burrow, their hearts pounding. What had once been a place of warmth and laughter now lay under siege. Death Eaters in black cloaks stalked through the smoke, their wands raised, hurling curses without mercy. Protego! Harry shouted, deflecting a jet of green light that seared past him. Ron rushed forward, his wand blazing, fury etched across his face. Get away from my home! He roared, unleashing a barrage of spells that sent 2 Death Eaters crashing backward. Hermione conjured protective wards around fleeing villagers, guiding them to safety while Neville countered hex after hex with calm precision. The 4 of them moved as one, instincts sharpened by years of battle, their spells weaving together in a deadly rhythm. But it quickly became clear this was no random attack. The Death Eaters weren't just causing destruction, they were hunting. Their movements were coordinated, their strikes targeted. And then Harry saw him. The silver mask glinted through the smoke, the air of shadows standing at the edge of the battlefield watching. His presence radiated a cold authority, his wand idle at his side, as though the chaos unfolded purely for his amusement. Harry's blood ran hot. He charged forward, deflecting curses that flew to intercept him, his focus locked solely on the masked figure. Potter, the heir called out, his voice calm and mocking even amid the chaos. Always running into the fire. Always desperate to be the hero. Leave them out of this. Harry shouted, his wand raised. This is between you and me. The heir tilted his head, the mask reflecting the flames. On the contrary, this is about all of you. The family you protect. The world you cling to. I will burn it away piece by piece until you understand what true power means. Before Harry could close the distance, the heir raised his wand and unleashed a shockwave of dark magic that ripped through the battlefield, sending Harry sprawling to the ground. Ron and Neville rushed to his side, struggling to hold back the advancing Death Eaters. Hermione's voice cut through the smoke, fierce and commanding as she reinforced the wards around the Burrow. The heir watched for only a moment longer before stepping back into the shadows. His followers began to retreat with him, their work already done. The Burrow still stood, battered but not broken, yet the message was clear. This was only the beginning. As the last of the Death Eaters vanished into smoke, Ron fell to his knees, clutching the scorched ground, his eyes blazing with fury. He came for us. For my family. Harry stood slowly, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. His chest heaved with the weight of anger and failure. He had sworn to protect them, but the heir had struck boldly, tearing into the heart of the one place Harry had always thought untouchable. And somewhere deep inside, a terrible realization took root. The heir wasn't just testing him anymore. He was declaring war. The Burrow smelled of smoke and scorched timber, though the fires had long been extinguished. What remained was a haunting quiet broken only by the crackle of weakened wards and the murmur of worried voices. The Weasley family gathered outside the house, shaken but alive, their faces pale under the soot. Molly clutched Ron tightly the moment she saw him, her tears staining his shoulder. Arthur moved among the damage in silence, inspecting the collapsed beams and singed walls with a grief-stricken expression. George sat on the garden wall, his jaw set, staring into the blackened sky as if daring the enemy to return. Harry stood apart from the others for a moment, staring at the wreckage of a home that had always been his sanctuary. Memories flooded back, the smell of Molly's cooking, the chaos of laughter at the dinner table, the safety he had always felt here. Now that safety had been ripped away, and the weight of it pressed down on his chest. Hermione approached, brushing ash from her robes. The wards held as long as they could, but he was testing them. He wanted us to see just how easily he could get through. Harry's fists clenched at his sides. And he wanted to remind me that no one I care about is safe. Ron broke away from his mother, his voice rough with anger. Then we stop waiting for him to attack. We go after him. Hunt him down before he gets another chance. Neville, ever steady, played placed a hand on Ron's shoulder. We can't fight him blind. We don't even know who he really is. Arthur finally spoke, his voice heavy with both sorrow and resolve. Whoever he is, he chose this family to strike first. That means he's afraid of the unity we represent. That's where our strength lies, Ron. Not in reckless vengeance, but in standing together. Harry turned back to Hermione, meeting her tired but determined eyes. He's right. We can't just react to his moves. We have to understand them. Hermione nodded. There's a pattern, Harry. These attacks aren't random. He's making statements. First Grimald Place, then the Burrow. He's dismantling your anchors, our safe havens. He wants to isolate us. George finally spoke, his voice edged with bitterness. Then he underestimates us. The Burrow may be damaged, but it still stands. He couldn't take it from us. Molly, wiping her eyes, straightened. We'll rebuild. We always do. But I will not lose another child to this madness. Do you hear me? Her voice carried a fierce strength that silenced even the wind. The family gathered closer, and for a brief moment, the unity of the Weasleys, the same unity that had always shielded Harry, burned brighter than the scars of the attack. Later that night, back at Grimald Place, Harry and Hermione sat together at the long table, parchment and books spread out before them. Rose slept upstairs under protective wards, her gentle breaths the only sound of peace in a house steeped in tension. Hermione tapped her quill against a list of names she had been compiling. I think we need to trace the ones who disappeared after Voldemort's fall. People who slipped through the cracks, families whose names vanished from records. Somewhere in that list we'll find him. Harry leaned back, rubbing his temples. And in the meantime, he keeps striking. If he goes after another family, if he attacks Hogwarts or Hogsmeade. He broke off, unable to finish the thought. Hermione reached across the table, taking his hand. Then we'll be ready. We survived once, Harry. We'll survive again. But this time, we have something Voldemort never truly had, each other, and the strength to protect what matters most. Harry looked into her eyes, the weight of exhaustion pressing down but unable to extinguish the fire that burned in him. We'll find him, Hermione. No matter what it takes. Far away, in the depths of the ruined manor, the heir of shadows stood before his followers once more. His voice was calm, calculated. They rebuild. They cling to hope. Let them. Each time they rise, I will strike harder, until even their hope turns to ash. The war had begun, and both sides knew there would be no turning back. The days after the attack on the Burrow were heavy with unease. Grimald Place became both fortress and war room. Maps of wizarding villages and ministry strongholds were pinned to the walls, layered with notes Hermione had painstakingly gathered. Every moment of quiet felt like the space between heartbeats, waiting for the next strike. Harry moved constantly, unable to sit still. He trained, he patrolled, he paced through the night. Hermione worried but did not stop him. She understood that for Harry, stillness was unbearable when danger pressed so close. Then the news came. An owl battered against the window with a message, so urgent its parchment was scorched around the edges. Hermione read it aloud, her voice trembling. Attack in Hogsmeade. Casualties unknown. Oris overwhelmed. Civilians trapped. Harry didn't wait for discussion. He grabbed his wand, his cloak, and looked at Hermione. We have to go. Now. Ron and Neville were already on their feet. Ginny, holding Rose, blocked the door. Harry. I know, Harry said quickly, his eyes locking on his daughter. Protect her. Don't leave this house, no matter what happens. His voice faltered only for a moment before he disapparated with a crack, Hermione and the others at his side. They arrived to chaos. Smoke poured through the cobbled streets of Hogsmeade, shops lay shattered, and terrified families huddled behind whatever cover they could find. Spells lit the sky in streaks of green and red, curses striking stone and sending fragments flying. Split up, Harry shouted. Get the civilians out. Hermione darted toward a group of children trapped behind a collapsed cart, shielding them as stray curses sliced through the air. Ron charged forward, his fury palpable, blasting Death Eaters off their feet with a relentless barrage. Neville planted himself in the center of the street, conjuring barriers of stone and vines that shielded retreating villagers. Harry cut through the fray, his wand ablur. He disarmed one attacker, stunned another, deflected a curse aimed at an old witch struggling to escape. But even as they fought, he realized the battle was too coordinated, too precise. This wasn't just terror, it was a trap. And then he saw it. At the far end of the street, standing tall amidst the destruction, the silver mask gleamed in the firelight. The heir of shadows was here, watching the carnage unfold like a conductor guiding an orchestra. His wand was raised, not casting blindly, but directing his followers with ruthless precision. Harry's heart hammered. "He's here," he shouted to the others, but the roar of spells nearly drowned him out. He forced his way forward, his eyes locked on the masked figure. The heir's voice carried unnaturally through the smoke and screams, clear as if whispered into Harry's ear. "You run to every fire, Potter. And still you cannot put them all out. How many will fall before you accept you cannot save them all?" Harry snarled, raising his wand. "You'll pay for this." The heir didn't flinch. He raised his wand and unleashed a torrent of dark magic that tore through the street like a storm. Windows shattered, stone cracked, and Harry was thrown back by the sheer force. He landed hard, struggling to rise, his ears ringing. Hermione appeared at his side, her own shield struggling to hold against the onslaught. "Harry, he's testing us. He's not here to win. He's here to make us chase him." But Harry pushed to his feet, fury burning hotter than the pain. "Then we end it now." He sprinted forward, dodging debris and curses, determined to reach the masked figure. For a moment, their eyes locked, green against the cold reflection of silver. But just as Harry raised his wand to strike, the heir vanished into the smoke, his followers disapparating in unison. The street fell eerily quiet. The Death Eaters were gone, leaving behind ruin, fire, and the cries of the wounded. Harry staggered, chest heaving, rage and helplessness warring inside him. He keeps slipping away. Every time. Hermione placed a steadying hand on his arm. Her face was streaked with ash, her eyes burning with determination. Then we stop playing his game. We find out who he is before he strikes again. Around them, Hogsmeade lay broken, its people shaken. But in Harry's chest, beneath the exhaustion and anger, a sharper resolve took hold. This war was no longer coming, it was already here. And this time, he would not wait for the enemy to choose the battlefield. The fires in Hogsmeade smoldered for hours after the Death Eaters vanished. Horror swarmed the streets, helping the wounded, extinguishing flames, and securing the perimeter. Harry, Hermione, Ron, and Neville stayed until the last villager was safe, though their bodies screamed with exhaustion. By the time they returned to Grimald Place, dawn was breaking. The air inside the house felt heavy with the tension of those waiting. Ginny sat by the fire with Rose in her arms, her eyes red from sleepless worry. When Harry entered, soot-streaked and silent, she didn't ask questions. She only looked at him, reading the truth in his expression. The enemy had struck again, and they were no closer to victory. Harry sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "He's always ahead of us. Always one step out of reach." Hermione, still clutching a stack of damaged parchment salvaged from the ministry records she'd been working on, sat beside him. "Then we find out who he is before he chooses the next target. No more reacting. No more waiting." Ron, pacing restlessly, muttered under his breath. "If he's leading this many Death Eaters, he's not just some random straggler. He's someone with influence. Someone with a name they fear." Hermione spread the parchments across the table. The names were fragmented, many blacked out or erased from official record. "I think these missing families hold the answer." After Voldemort's fall, a few bloodlines disappeared. Too cleanly. Too deliberately. Someone didn't want them traced. Neville leaned over the parchment, frowning. "You think he comes from one of them?" Hermione nodded. "Not just comes from, he leads because of it. If he truly calls himself the heir, then his identity must tie him to something powerful. A legacy that gives him weight in the eyes of his followers." Harry stared at the blurred ink. His gut twisted. A legacy like Voldemort's. The thought hung heavy in the air. Later that night, when the others had retired, Harry found himself in the nursery. Rose slept peacefully, the faintest smile on her lips as though untouched by the chaos beyond the walls. He rested a hand on the edge of her crib, his chest tight with unspoken fear. Hermione entered quietly, her hair loose around her shoulders, exhaustion plain on her face. She joined him without a word, slipping her hand into his. "He's not Voldemort," Harry whispered, as if speaking too loudly would break the fragile peace of the room. But he wants me to believe he's worse. Hermione squeezed his hand. Then we find out the truth. We strip away his mask piece by piece, until he has nowhere left to hide. Far from Grimald Place, the heir of shadows convened with his inner circle in the ruined manor. The chamber was dark, lit only by the flickering green of enchanted torches. His followers knelt before him, their faces hidden beneath their hoods, their voices hushed with reverence. One dared to speak. "The attack succeeded, my lord. The village burns, and the Aurors scramble to rebuild. But Potter, he still stands." The heir's voice was cold, deliberate. "Of course he stands. That is his nature. He clings to survival, to hope, to the illusion that he can save everyone. It is not enough to kill him. I will unravel him until even his hope is gone." He moved to the far wall where an ancient tapestry hung, frayed but still intact. His gloved hand brushed over a sigil half hidden in shadow, a symbol of a pureblood family long thought extinguished. His masked face tilted as though savoring the secret only he knew. "They do not yet see it," he murmured. "But soon Potter will know whose shadow he walks in. And when he does, it will already be too late." Hermione spent the following day buried in parchment. She had summoned every available record from the Ministry archives, piecing together scraps of information that had been intentionally obscured. Harry sat beside her, scribbling notes in silence, his frustration mounting with each dead end. At last, Hermione pushed aside a scroll and tapped her quill against a smudged name that had nearly been erased from existence. "Here. The Gaunt family." Harry froze. The name was like a ghost rising from the past. Voldemort's line. Hermione nodded. Officially, they were extinguished. Marvolo Gaunt, his daughter Merope, and Tom Riddle. But these records show something different. Look at this. One of the cousins vanished from the census after the war with Grindelwald. Not dead. Just gone. If that bloodline continued in secret, it could explain everything. Ron, who had just walked in carrying tea, nearly dropped the tray. "You're saying he's related to you-know-who?" Neville leaned closer to the parchment, his expression troubled. "That would explain why the Death Eaters follow him so blindly. They see him as an heir to the Dark Lord himself." Harry's stomach twisted. "He's not Voldemort. He can't be. Voldemort is gone." Hermione's gaze was steady. "But his blood isn't. And if this man believes himself the rightful heir, then his entire crusade isn't just about power. It's about claiming Voldemort's legacy as his own." The thought left the room heavy with silence. Harry looked at the names, the blurred ink, the fragments of history deliberately hidden. He remembered Voldemort's obsession with bloodlines, the way he twisted ancestry into a weapon. Could this masked man be continuing the same poisonous vision? Meanwhile, in the ruined manor, one of the heir's followers struggled with unease. A woman named Selwyn knelt before her master, her loyalty wavering in the shadow of his growing ambition. She had followed him because he promised order after Voldemort's chaos, because he spoke of rebuilding a world where pureblood families would rule. But as she watched him caress the old Gaunt sigil on the tapestry, a creeping fear coiled in her chest. "My lord," she dared to ask, her voice trembling, "is it true that you are of the Gaunt line?" The heir's silver mask turned toward her, the flicker of torchlight gleaming across its surface. For a long moment, silence stretched, and Selwyn felt her heart pound painfully in her chest. Then he spoke, his voice low, dangerous. "Truth is a weapon, Selwyn. What matters is not what is, but what they believe. And they will believe I am the shadow of the Dark Lord reborn." Selwyn bowed lower, her body shaking. She did not know whether to feel fear or awe. The heir's gaze lingered on her before shifting back to the tapestry. "Potter will dig. He will search for answers. And when he finds the truth, it will destroy him." Back at Grimald Place, Hermione gathered the parchments, determination burning in her eyes. "If this is tied to the Gaunt family, we need to trace every survivor, every descendant. Someone out there knows the truth. We just have to find them before he strikes again." Harry stared at Rose's tiny blanket draped over the back of a chair. His chest tightened with a mix of rage and fear. "Then we start tonight. I won't let him carry on Voldemort's legacy. Not while we're alive to stop it." The next evening, under a sky washed silver with moonlight, Harry and Hermione set out for Little Hangleton. Ron had offered to come, but Harry insisted this was something he and Hermione had to see for themselves. Neville remained at Grimald Place with Ginny, guarding Rose and the others, while the couple slipped into the night cloaked in invisibility. The path to the Gaunt shack was overgrown, nearly swallowed by the forest. Even after years of abandonment, the air around it still carried a heaviness that made the hair on Harry's arms rise. The walls sagged, the roof barely held together, and weeds pushed through cracks in the stone. It looked like it had been forgotten by time, but the closer they drew, the more Hermione sensed that something was not right. "Wards," she whispered, her eyes narrowing as her wand traced faint glowing lines in the air. "Fresh ones. Someone has been here recently." Harry tightened his grip on his wand. "Then we're on the right trail." They moved carefully inside, the floor creaking beneath their feet. Dust blanketed the furniture, yet there were signs of disturbance, tracks in the grime, the faint imprint of boots. A torn scrap of black fabric lay near the hearth, too new to have belonged to the Gaunts. Hermione bent down, examining the fireplace. Her fingers brushed against the stone until she found a faint carving etched into the soot-darkened wall. The mark was crude but unmistakable, the same sigil they had seen in the Death Eater attacks. "He was here," Hermione whispered. "He's tied to this place." Harry's jaw clenched. This was Voldemort's home. It makes sense he'd come back to it. He wants to root himself in that history. Before they could search further, a voice echoed from the shadows outside. Cold mocking. "So, the famous Potter and his clever wife come sniffing at ruins. How predictable." Harry spun around, his wand raised, as a masked figure stepped into the doorway. His mask was different from the others, etched with silver lines that shimmered faintly, like veins of light. "You," Harry growled. The heir of shadows tilted his head, almost amused. "You dig at the past, thinking it will arm you. But all the past holds for you, Potter, is pain. You should have stayed in London, holding your child close. At least then you might have died in peace." Hermione's voice cut sharp through the tension. "You're tied to the Gaunt family. That's why you're here." The heir chuckled. "So quick. And yet you know nothing of what I am. The Gaunts squandered their blood, squandered their power. I am not bound by their weakness. I am what Voldemort should have been. Stronger. Smarter. Eternal." Harry's chest burned with fury. "You'll never be him. Voldemort is dead, and you'll fall just like he did." The heir's mask gleamed as he raised his wand. "We shall see." A blast of green light shot across the room. Harry pulled Hermione to the ground, the curse scorching the air above them. Splinters exploded from the wall as the shack shook with the force of the duel. Spells ricocheted in every direction, red, blue, green, lighting up the collapsing room. Harry and Hermione fought in unison, their movements perfectly aligned, but the air was fast, his magic sharp and brutal. Each flick of his wand carried a force that made Harry's arm ache as he blocked. At one point, Hermione managed to strike his mask with a shattering charm. The silver cracked, a thin fracture running down the side. For the first time, Harry glimpsed a sliver of pale skin beneath, though the face remained hidden. The heir staggered, then let out a low, furious laugh. "Closer, Potter." But not enough. With a sweep of his wand, he unleashed a wave of shadowy energy that hurled them both backward. The walls buckled, and the roof gave a groan. Before the shack caved in, the heir vanished in a whirl of darkness, leaving only the echo of his voice behind. "When next we meet, you'll see whose blood runs through my veins." The shack collapsed around them. Harry and Hermione barely made it out, tumbling into the dirt as the structure crumbled to rubble. For several moments, neither spoke, their breaths ragged. Finally, Hermione whispered, her voice tight with both fear and determination. "He's not just pretending, Harry. He believes it. He believes he's Voldemort's true heir." Harry stared at the ruins, fists clenched. "Then we'll rip away that mask and prove he's nothing but another coward hiding behind shadows." But deep inside, a part of him trembled. Because if the heir truly carried the Gaunt blood, then Voldemort's darkness had not died with him. It had only changed form. The return to Grimald Place was quiet, the kind of silence that pressed down heavier than words. Harry and Hermione stumbled through the door past midnight, their clothes torn, faces streaked with soot. Ron sprang up from the table, his wand drawn before recognition softened his expression. Neville stood too, tension etched in his posture. "What happened?" Ron demanded, his voice sharp. "You look like you went through a dragon's stomach." Hermione dropped a bundle of scorched parchment onto the table and sank into a chair. The Gaunt shack. He was there, waiting for us. Neville's eyes widened. You saw him? Harry nodded grimly. We fought. He's powerful, more than I thought. He nearly brought the whole place down on us. And Harry hesitated, his mind replaying the moment Hermione's spell fractured the mask. The glimpse of pale skin beneath. The fury in the heir's laugh. Ron leaned forward. And he what? Harry met his gaze. He believes he's Voldemort's heir. Not just as a title. He thinks he carries his blood. The words hung in the air like a curse. Ginny, who had been rocking Rose in the corner, stilled. The baby stirred slightly, sensing the tension. Ron scoffed, though unease flickered in his eyes. That's mad. Voldemort's line ended with him. Didn't it? Hermione shook her head. Not exactly. The Gaunts were nearly wiped out, yes, but there are records of a cousin who disappeared generations ago. If his descendants survived in secret, she trailed off, the weight of the possibility thick in her voice. Neville spoke softly, almost reluctantly. That would explain the way the Death Eaters follow him. They don't just see power, they see lineage. Harry sat down heavily, rubbing his scar though it hadn't burned. Lineage or not, it doesn't matter. He's dangerous. Strong. Strong enough to kill us if we slip even once. Hermione reached across the table, placing her hand over his. We've faced darkness before, Harry. We didn't win by being stronger, we won by being smarter. We'll find the truth, and we'll use it against him. Ron nodded, though his voice was rough. And this time we're not kids. He won't catch us off guard. But in the dim firelight, Ginny whispered the thought none of them wanted to speak aloud. If he truly carries Voldemort's blood, what does that mean for Rose? For every child born into this world? No one answered. Far away in the gutted manor, the heir of shadows stood alone in a dim chamber. His cracked mask lay on the table before him. He touched the fracture running down its silver lines, his gloved fingers tracing it as though it were a wound. His reflection stared back from the broken surface. Pale skin, sharp features. Eyes that burned with something more than human hatred. For a long time he said nothing. Then, with a flick of his wand, the mask repaired itself, the crack vanishing as though it had never been. Still, his voice when he finally spoke was taut with fury. They will learn soon enough, he whispered. The shadow they face is not just a man. It is legacy. It is destiny. Behind him, the tapestry of the Gaunt family swayed as though stirred by unseen wind. The following morning, Harry, Hermione, Ron, and Neville gathered in the library of Grimald Place. Parchments, maps, and ministry records littered the table, each one a fragment of a puzzle that seemed determined to remain unsolved. Rose gurgled softly from her cradle in the corner, watched over by Ginny, whose tired eyes betrayed her concern. Hermione tapped her quill against a weathered genealogical chart, her voice calm but insistent. The key lies here. The Gaunt family tree. Every official record insists the bloodline ended with Tom Riddle. But there are hints, footnotes, missing names, unexplained disappearances. Ron squinted at the parchment. You're saying one of them slipped away before the line burned out? Exactly, Hermione said, her finger moving along the faint branches of the chart. This cousin, Elias Gaunt, vanished sometime after Grindelwald's war. No death certificate, no property transfers, nothing. Just gone. And there's evidence he wasn't alone. Harry leaned forward. What kind of evidence? Hermione reached for another parchment, one she'd borrowed from the Department of Mysteries. Financial transactions. Small, scattered, but they kept appearing long after the Gaunts were supposed to be extinct. Hidden under other names. Always around the same village, Dover. Neville frowned. If Elias had descendants, they would have grown up outside the main wizarding world. Hidden. Forgotten. Until one of them decided to step back into the light, Harry said bitterly. Ron rubbed the back of his neck. So what do? Go digging around Dover until we trip over some long-lost Gaunt. Hermione shook her head. We need more than guesswork. We need confirmation. If the heir is truly of this bloodline, someone in Dover will know. A whisper, a rumor, something. Harry's eyes hardened with determination. Then that's where we go. That evening, the four of them traveled to Dover under disillusionment charms. The village was quiet, a coastal town with narrow streets and stone cottages that seemed to sleep under the lull of the sea. To Muggle eyes, it was nothing more than a sleepy port, but Hermione's wand traced faint magical wards woven into the outskirts. "Someone's been protecting this place," she murmured. They split up to search. Harry and Hermione wandered the back streets, asking subtle questions in the few wizarding taverns tucked between Muggle shops. Most shrugged them off, but one old barman narrowed his eyes when Harry mentioned the name Gaunt. "Gaunts?" the man muttered, polishing a glass. "A cursed lot, them. All dead now, far as anyone knows. But there was a family up by the cliffs years back. Kept to themselves. Said they were distant kin. Strange folk. Mean. Always whispered about shadows." Hermione leaned closer. "What happened to them?" The barman hesitated, then shook his head. "Vanished. Whole house burned down one night. No bodies found. Some say they left willingly, some say worse. No one goes near the ruins anymore." When Harry and Hermione returned to the rendezvous point, Ron and Neville were waiting, both looking unsettled. "We heard the same," Ron said grimly. "Whispers about a family who hid themselves away. People avoided them. Said they carried darkness in their blood." Neville folded his arms. "If that family survived the fire, one of their descendants could be the heir." Hermione's mind raced, piecing it together. "The ruins by the cliffs. If we find them, we might uncover proof. Records. Something he left behind." Harry nodded firmly. "Then that's where we go next. If he's hiding in shadows, we'll drag him into the light." Far away, in the ruined manor, the heir of shadows stood before his gathered followers. His voice rang through the chamber, sharp and commanding. "Potter chases ghosts. He digs through ashes, hoping to find answers. Let him. Each step he takes brings him closer, not to victory, but to despair. For when he learns the truth of me, it will not be a weapon, it will be his undoing." The Death Eaters bowed their heads, their loyalty unshaken. And behind his silver mask, the heir allowed himself a smile that held no warmth. The sea crashed violently against the cliffs of Dover as Harry, Hermione, Ron, and Neville approached the ruins. The wind carried salt and spray, whipping their cloaks around their legs as they stared at what remained of the house. It was little more than a husk. Charred timbers jutted upward like blackened bones, and the stone walls were half swallowed by ivy and moss. But there was something unnatural in the air, an oppressive heaviness, as if the land itself remembered the screams of those who had once lived there. Hermione raised her wand and whispered, "Hominum revelio." The air shimmered faintly, but no human presence revealed itself. Still, she frowned. "There are traces of magic. Old but not gone." Harry stepped forward, his boots crunching over broken glass. He crouched, brushing aside debris until he uncovered a burned fragment of parchment, its edges brittle. The ink was nearly erased, but one word remained clear: Gaunt. Hermione's breath caught. "This is it. Proof they were here." Ron kicked at a collapsed beam, sending dust into the air. "If this lot really were descendants, why torch the place? Cover their tracks." Neville scanned the ruins, his voice low. "Or someone else burned it. Someone who wanted the bloodline silenced." As they pushed deeper into the wreckage, Hermione noticed a stone stairwell leading downward. Half buried beneath rubble, it spiraled into darkness. "There's a cellar," she said, her eyes narrowing with resolve. "Help me clear it." Together, they shifted the debris with spells, revealing the narrow entrance. A damp chill wafted up, carrying the scent of rot and seawater. Harry led the way, wand lit, the others close behind. The cellar was small, cramped, and damp. Broken shelves lined the walls, their contents ruined by fire and time. Yet in the far corner, beneath a pile of rubble, Hermione spotted something glinting faintly. She hurried over and unearthed a small metal box, scorched but intact. She opened it carefully, revealing scraps of parchment inside. Genealogical records, hastily written letters, fragments of names. And on one slip, clearer than the rest, was a name neither of them had seen before. Cassius Gaunt. Hermione's voice trembled as she read it aloud. Cassius Gaunt, a descendant of Elias. These are family records. He existed. Harry's grip tightened on his wand. And if he lived, then the heir could be his son. Before they could process further, the walls of the cellar shuddered. A low rumble filled the chamber, dust raining down from the ceiling. Ron's eyes widened. "Trap. It's a bloody trap." The stairwell collapsed in a crash of stone, cutting off their exit. Shadows rippled along the walls, forming into the shape of serpents slithering toward them. The torches Harry had conjured sputtered as the air thickened with a dark enchantment. The heir's voice filled the chamber, echoing as though the very stones spoke. "You dig where you should not, Potter. You unearth graves best left buried. Did you truly think I would leave my bloodline unguarded?" Harry raised his wand, fury igniting in his chest. "Show yourself." The shadows coiled tighter, their fangs glistening, their bodies cold as smoke. Hermione shielded the group with a flick of her wand, her voice strained. "These aren't real serpents, they're constructs. But they can still kill." Neville slashed at the nearest one with a curse, dispersing it into black mist. Ron hurled a blasting hex at the far wall, trying to carve a way out. The cellar quaked again, as though the cliffs themselves were being torn apart. And through it all, the heir's voice carried a chilling calm. "You cannot destroy me, Potter. You chase fragments, but fragments will not save you. You will learn the truth in time, and when you do, it will break you." Harry's eyes blazed with determination. "Then I'll find it faster than you can stop me." With a roar, he unleashed a surge of raw magic that lit the cellar in white fire, scattering the shadow serpents. The ground heaved, and with Ron's blasting curse striking at the same moment, part of the ceiling gave way. Daylight poured in through the rubble. One by one, they scrambled out, coughing from dust and smoke, the sea wind washing over them as the ruins collapsed behind. Breathless, Hermione clutched the metal box to her chest. "We have proof now. Cassius Gaunt lived. And if the heir is his descendant—" Harry cut her off, his voice hard as stone. "Then we know where to look next. We find everything about Cassius. His life, his children, his legacy. And we end it." Behind them, the ruins of the house sank further into the cliffside, swallowed by sea mist. And somewhere far away, the heir smiled in satisfaction, for they had taken exactly the step he wanted. Back in Grimald Place, the group gathered around the metal box like it contained the key to everything. The scraps of parchment had been dried, cleaned, and charmed to preserve what little ink remained. Hermione hovered over them, her brow furrowed as she pieced fragments into sense. "Cassius Gaunt," she murmured again, the name rolling off her tongue with a weight that felt older than the ink on the page. "There are at least 2 letters here, both signed with his name. One is addressed to someone called Aurelia. Perhaps his wife." Ron scratched the back of his neck. "Never heard of him. And I thought we'd studied every cursed Gaunt there was in history of magic." "That's the point," Hermione said firmly. "Cassius was hidden, wiped out of the records. These letters prove he existed, and that he might have continued the bloodline. We need to know how far it spread." Neville leaned over, his expression thoughtful. "If he had children, they might not have been raised in the same squalor as the rest of the Gaunts. They could have lived among other families, unnoticed." Harry, restless, stood and began pacing. "So we search the Ministry archives again. We find every trace of Cassius. Birth records, marriage records, property deeds, anything." Hermione looked up at him, her expression softening. "We'll find him, Harry. But we can't rush. We need to be precise. If the heir truly is descended from Cassius, he's counting on us stumbling in the dark. We need the whole picture before we confront him again." That evening, Hermione convinced Harry to accompany her to the Ministry's Hall of Records under the cover of night. Ron and Neville stayed behind to guard Grimald Place. Ginny, though clearly unhappy about being left again, agreed to keep watch over Rose. The Hall of Records was cavernous, shelves stretching higher than the eye could follow, filled with tomes and scrolls that held centuries of wizarding lineage. The silence was broken only by the soft echo of their footsteps as Harry and Hermione moved between the aisles. Hermione guided him to a section marked Family Archives, Restricted. She produced the special clearance badge Kingsley had reluctantly given her. The enchanted gate swung open, groaning on its hinges. Inside, Hermione's wand light danced over dusty spines until she found what she was looking for, a thick tome bound in worn green leather. Genealogical Registry of Pureblood Families. She flipped through, scanning entries with sharp eyes. "Here," she whispered, pointing to an entry. "Elias Gaunt, listed as missing." And beneath, barely visible, a note in faded ink. "Line continued, see Appendix C." Harry leaned over her shoulder, his pulse quickening. "Appendix C?" They hurried to the back, but where Appendix C should have been, the pages had been ripped out. Only frayed edges remained. Harry slammed the book shut, his frustration echoing in the silent hall. Someone destroyed it. Someone wanted him erased. Hermione placed a steady hand on the cover. Or someone took it because it was valuable, which means it could still exist, just not here. As they debated, a faint sound stirred in the distance, a low hiss, like something slithering across stone. Harry raised his wand, instincts on edge. Hermione mirrored him, her heart pounding. From the shadows between the shelves, a figure emerged. Cloaked, hooded, its wand glowing faintly. A Death Eater. "You should not be here," the figure rasped. "The Master knew you would come sniffing after names. He left something for you." Before Harry could react, the Death Eater hurled a scroll across the floor. It skidded to Hermione's feet, sealed with black wax. Then, with a sharp crack, the cloaked figure disapparated, leaving only silence. Harry and Hermione stared at the scroll. Slowly, Hermione picked it up. The wax seal was carved with the same sigil they had seen burned into Hogsmeade. Her voice trembled. "He knew we'd come. He wanted us to find this." Harry's jaw tightened. "Then let's open it. Whatever game he's playing, we won't let him control it." Hermione broke the seal, unrolling the parchment. The ink inside was fresh, written in a sharp, deliberate hand. It read, "Cassius Gaunt was my forefather. But you are too late, Potter. The line did not end with him. It ends with you." Harry's grip on his wand whitened. Hermione stared at the words, her mind racing. If this was true, then the heir wasn't just playing with shadows. He was declaring his bloodline openly, daring them to challenge it. And worse, he had just turned their hunt into a race. The parchment sat between Harry and Hermione on the library table at Grimald Place, its black wax seal broken, its words burning into their thoughts long after they'd read them. The fire in the hearth crackled, casting shadows across their faces. Ron and Neville leaned over the table, while Ginny lingered near the cradle, her arms folded protectively across her chest as Rose slept. Ron broke the silence first. "Well, that's bloody, isn't it? He's just admitted it. Cassius Gaunt was his forefather. He's the real deal." Hermione shook her head sharply. "No. We can't take this at face value. He wants us to believe it. That scroll could be genuine, but it could just as easily be a forgery designed to lure us down a path of his choosing." Neville frowned. "But if it's true, then every attack, every move he's made, it all makes sense. He's rallying people around the Gaunt name, the idea that Voldemort's bloodline still walks the earth." Harry had been silent, his eyes fixed on the parchment as if he could force it to reveal more. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but steady. "Voldemort built his empire on fear and lies. He manipulated bloodlines, twisted truth, and forced people to see what he wanted them to see. This heir could be doing the same." Ginny stepped forward, her tone colder than any of them expected. "So either he is Voldemort's heir, or he's pretending to be. Does it matter? Both are dangerous." Hermione exhaled slowly, trying to steady her racing thoughts. "It matters because truth is power. If we can expose him as a fraud, his followers will crumble. If he is real, then we need to prove it to know what we're facing. Either way, knowledge is our weapon." Harry finally tore his gaze from the parchment. "So we keep digging. We don't let him dictate the pace." Ron grimaced. "Easier said than done. He's already one step ahead, tossing us clues like bait." Hermione bit her lip, thinking hard. If Cassius Gaunt existed, there must be records outside the ministry. Personal letters, journals, something. Hogwarts kept extensive archives of students. If Cassius ever studied there, we might find mention of him. Neville nodded. And if he didn't, that absence might be just as telling. A Gaunt who avoided Hogwarts? That's unusual. Harry felt a spark of determination flare inside him. Then Hogwarts is our next stop. If there's any record of Cassius, the school will have it. As the group began forming plans, Ginny's voice cut in, sharp and unyielding. "And what if he's setting another trap? You barely made it out of Dover alive. What happens if Hogwarts is next on his list?" Harry met her gaze. "Then we'll be ready for him." That same night, far from Grimald Place, the heir of shadows stood among his followers in the ruined manor, his silver mask reflecting the dim green light of enchanted torches. In his gloved hand, he held a twin to the scroll Harry and Hermione had received, its black wax seal still unbroken. He turned to his Death Eaters, his voice smooth, controlled, laced with quiet triumph. They chase what I give them. They cling to scraps of truth, desperate to believe they are unraveling my secrets. But every step they take is the one I have chosen. One follower dared to raise his head. And when they reached the end, my lord? The heir's mask tilted slightly, the faint crack Hermione had made now hidden by flawless enchantment. His voice lowered into something cold and merciless. When they reach the end, they will see that there was never a choice. Only the shadow I left for them. The chamber echoed with whispers of devotion as his followers bowed, and the heir's laughter, low and hollow, filled the air like a curse. The night air was cool as Harry, Hermione, Ron, and Neville disembarked from the thestral carriage at the edge of Hogwarts grounds. The castle loomed in the distance, its windows glowing like watchful eyes. For Harry, the sight carried a pang of nostalgia mixed with unease. He had walked these grounds as a boy, fought his last battle here as a young man, and now returned as a father chasing shadows. Hermione drew her cloak tighter around her shoulders, her sharp gaze scanning the familiar towers. Hogwarts has kept records for centuries. If Cassius Gaunt ever set foot here, we'll find it, Ron muttered. If he didn't, then we'll have wasted a perfectly good night's sleep. But even he looked unsettled, his wand close at hand. Neville, now far more confident within the castle than the rest, walked with purpose. The archives under the library aren't used by students. Most don't even know they exist. It's where old student registries and bloodline documents are kept. As they made their way across the grounds, Harry's scar gave a faint throb. Not sharp, not searing, but enough to make him tense. He said nothing, not wanting to alarm the others, but deep down he knew it wasn't just memory. The heir's shadow was already brushing against this place. Inside, the castle was quiet, the portraits asleep, and the staircases still. They moved quickly, wands lit with whispered Lumos charms until they reached the library. Neville led them down a spiral staircase that opened into a narrow stone corridor. Dust lay thick on the steps, disturbed only by the occasional footprint, fresh ones. Hermione froze, her breath catching. Someone's been here recently. Harry crouched, running a finger along the print. It was faint but unmistakable. Boot prints. Large. More than one set. Ron tightened his grip on his wand. Brilliant. We're not the only ones looking for Cassius. The corridor ended in a small iron door bound with ancient runes. Hermione waved her wand in precise motions, whispering incantations under her breath. The runes glowed, then faded, the lock clicking open with a reluctant groan. The archive was a cavernous chamber, lined with shelves of leather-bound tomes and scrolls. Dust motes swirled in the air like tiny ghosts disturbed by their arrival. Hermione immediately darted toward a shelf labeled genealogical records, her eyes alight despite the danger. If Cassius Gaunt lived during the 19th century, there should be mention of him here. Harry and Ron spread out, scanning volumes, while Neville kept near the entrance, his eyes sharp for movement. Minutes stretched into an hour, the silence broken only by the turning of pages. Finally, Hermione gasped softly. Here, look. They crowded around as she pointed to a faded ledger. The entry was brief, written in spidery script. Cassius Gaunt, bloodline claimant, denied admission 1834. Grounds undisclosed. Ron frowned. Denied admission? Who gets denied from Hogwarts? Hermione's brow furrowed. It's rare. Almost unheard of. The only cases are those deemed unstable or dangerous. Harry's chest tightened. So he was real. He existed. And he was turned away. Neville swallowed hard. Which means his descendants may have carried not just his blood, but his resentment. Before Hermione could reply, the iron door behind them slammed shut with a deafening clang. The torches flared green, throwing the chamber into sinister light. From the shadows at the far end of the room, cloaked figures emerged, masks glinting. Death Eaters. Ron swore under his breath. Of course it was a trap. A voice, cold and familiar, echoed around them though its owner was nowhere to be seen. You follow the trail I leave, step by step, like moths to flame. And now, you stand exactly where I wanted you. Harry's scar seared, and he knew the air was close, perhaps not in body, but his presence filled the chamber. Hermione snapped her wand up, her eyes blazing. You underestimate us. The Death Eaters advanced, and in the silence before the clash, Harry realized the truth. The heir had not just given them a breadcrumb. He had brought them to the very heart of his game. The air inside the archive thickened with tension as masked figures closed in, their wands raised and ready. The green torchlight flickered against the shelves, making the dust dance like embers in the heat of a coming fire. Harry, Hermione, Ron, and Neville stood in a tight circle, their backs nearly touching, every muscle braced for the storm. The first curse flew, a jet of crimson light slicing through the chamber. Harry deflected it with a sharp flick, the impact rattling his wrist. "Stay together," he barked, eyes darting across the advancing line of enemies. Ron swung his wand in a wide arc, blasting a shelf from its base. Tomes cascaded down, crashing onto two Death Eaters and forcing them to stagger back. "Never thought books would save my life," he shouted, already firing another spell. Hermione's mind raced even as she cast. She wasn't just fighting, she was cataloging. Every move, every mask, every flicker of their robes. These weren't random Death Eaters. They moved with discipline, as if they'd been trained to fight as one. That realization chilled her even more than their numbers. Neville proved invaluable, his voice commanding in a way Harry had rarely seen outside battle. "Harry, left flank. Hermione, shield high." He sent a vicious curse flying, striking a masked figure square in the chest. The man crumpled, his wand clattering against the stone floor. Harry's scar flared again, sharper this time. The heir wasn't in the room, but he was close enough to watch through their eyes. Harry clenched his teeth, rage boiling in his chest. He would not let this shadow toy with them. One Death Eater lunged forward, their wand aimed directly at Hermione. Harry reacted without thought, his shield charm snapping into place between them. The curse shattered against it, sparking wildly before dissipating. "You'll have to do better than that," he growled, his own spell firing back in return. Across the chamber, Ron was locked in a duel with a tall Death Eater, who fought with brutal precision. Sparks flew as curse met counter-curse. Ron ducked just in time to avoid a slicing hex, his face pale but determined. "Bit busy here," he called, sweat dripping down his brow. Hermione whipped her wand toward the ceiling, murmuring an incantation. A cascade of falling debris rained down between them and the advancing Death Eaters, buying them precious seconds. "We can't hold this position forever," she shouted. Neville stepped closer, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We don't need to. If we destroy the archives, they lose whatever they came for." Hermione froze, her heart lurching. "But the knowledge, these records are irreplaceable." Harry made the call without hesitation. "Better lost than used against us. Do it." At that same moment, back at Grimald Place, Rose stirred in her cradle. Ginny, who had been dozing lightly beside her, sat bolt upright as the baby whimpered, her tiny hands curling in distress. The room felt colder, the shadows in the corners deeper. Ginny's hand flew to her wand, her instincts screaming that something was wrong. Rose's whimper grew into a cry, but it wasn't ordinary. Her small body arched, her eyes squeezed shut, and from her throat came a sound that didn't belong to a child. It was a sharp, echoing wail that made the very air quiver. The portrait of Phineas Nigellus rattled on its hook, muttering in alarm. Ginny scooped her daughter into her arms, whispering frantically, "Shh, darling, it's all right, it's all right." But deep down, she knew it wasn't. Rose wasn't just sensing her parents' danger. Something was reaching for her, touching her through the bond she carried. Back in the archive, Harry froze for a fraction of a second as he felt it too. Not through magic or scar, but through something deeper. His daughter. Fear, pain, and a strange pulse of energy not his own washed through him, nearly dropping him to his knees. The heir's voice slithered through the chamber once more, though no one could place its source. "She feels me. Even now. The child of Potter and Granger cannot escape the shadow of her blood." Harry's heart thundered in his chest. The fight, the records, the danger, all of it paled in comparison to that truth. The heir wasn't just coming for them. He was coming for Rose. The air in the archive roared with curses and collapsing shelves, yet Harry barely heard it. The heir's words gnawed at his mind, every syllable wrapping around his heart like a snake. Rose. His daughter's name was no longer a secret whispered at home. The enemy had spoken it aloud in the darkness of battle. Hermione's hand gripped his arm, yanking him back into focus as a curse exploded near his feet. "Harry, now is not the time," she shouted, eyes flashing. Her voice carried both command and desperation. Ron drove his shoulder into a Death Eater, sending the man sprawling into a pile of fallen tomes. "We're boxed in. The longer we fight, the worse this gets." Neville pointed his wand toward the far wall. "There's a passage beyond the third row. It connects to an old tunnel under the greenhouses. It's not stable, but it's our best shot." The Death Eaters pressed closer, green light streaking the air, their formation tightening like jaws around prey. Harry's instincts screamed to hold ground, to fight until there was nothing left. But then Rose's cry echoed in his memory, not from his ears, but from deep inside, where her fear brushed against his soul. "Move," he commanded, his voice breaking through the chaos. Hermione conjured a wall of flame between them and their attackers, the shelves igniting in a roar of orange heat. The acrid smoke filled the chamber, sending the Death Eaters into coughing disarray. Ron and Neville flanked Harry as they barreled toward the indicated row, their spells clearing a path. The third row ended in a jagged stone wall, but Neville slammed his hand against a faint carving of a flower. The wall rumbled, grinding open just enough for them to squeeze through one by one. As Hermione ducked through, a curse grazed her shoulder, tearing her sleeve. She gasped but kept moving, refusing to falter. Ron followed, hurling one last hex that cracked the floor beneath their pursuers. Neville shoved Harry inside before slipping through himself, the stone ceiling behind them with an echoing slam. The tunnel was narrow, the air damp and foul, but it was escape. Harry's lungs burned as they stumbled forward, the only sound their ragged breaths and the faint dripping of unseen water. Hermione pressed a hand against her shoulder, wincing. "We can't go back to the castle. Not tonight. He'll expect it." Ron's face was pale in the gloom. "Bloody hell, Harry," he said her name. "Rose. How does he know?" Harry couldn't answer. His fists clenched so tightly his knuckles ached. The thought of Rose in the heir's sights twisted his stomach into iron. Neville's voice was steady, though quiet. "Then the fight's not just about us anymore. It never was. If he's reaching for your daughter, Harry, then everything changes. We need to protect her before he tries again." Harry met Hermione's gaze in the darkness. Her face was streaked with ash, her eyes hard as steel. She didn't need to say a word. He knew she felt the same burning fear he did. Meanwhile, back at Grimald Place, Ginny was pacing the nursery floor, Rose clutched against her chest. The baby had calmed, but her tiny hands still twitched, her eyes opening and closing as if caught in a dream that wasn't her own. Ginny murmured soothingly, though her own voice trembled. "You're safe, sweetheart. I won't let anything touch you. Not while I'm here." But when she passed the old mirror propped against the wall, she froze. For a moment, Rose's reflection didn't match her movements. The infant in the glass stared outward, her eyes glinting with something dark, something ancient. Ginny's blood ran cold. She jerked the blanket over the mirror, her wand at the ready, and whispered fiercely, "Over my dead body." Far away, in his hidden lair, the heir of shadows smiled behind his mask. He had touched the child once, and he would do so again. The firelight in Grimald Place flickered low as Ginny sat rigidly in the rocking chair, Rose swaddled against her chest. She hadn't dared put the baby back in the cradle after what she had seen in the mirror. The blanket still hung over the glass, unmoving, but Ginny's heart raced as though the shadows might crawl free at any second. Rose's breathing steadied, but her tiny brow furrowed in sleep, lips twitching as though she were caught between cries. Ginny brushed her daughter's cheek with trembling fingers. "It's all right, love," she whispered, though her voice cracked. "Mummy's here. No one can take you." But deep down she wasn't sure. The heir had found a way to reach them even here. And Harry wasn't at her side. Unable to bear the silence any longer, Ginny stood and carried Rose into the kitchen where Creature shuffled about, muttering to himself. The old elf froze when he saw her, his large eyes widening at the sight of the restless baby. "Mistress Ginny," he croaked. "Something is wrong with the little one. Creature feels it in the house. Dark air, whispers not meant for Creature's ears." Ginny's stomach tightened. She had hoped it was only her imagination, but if even Creature sensed it. She moved closer, lowering her voice. "Can you protect her while I fetch help?" Creature bowed stiffly, his gnarled hands reaching out with surprising gentleness to cradle the baby. Creature will protect young Rose with his life. None shall touch her in this house while Creature draws breath. Ginny hesitated, reluctant to let go, but she knew she couldn't fight this alone. She laid Rose in his arms and quickly moved to the old flue. Throwing in a pinch of powder, she called for Andromeda Tonks, the only which she trusted to respond swiftly without panicking. Moments later, Andromeda stepped through the green flames, her sharp eyes instantly narrowing as she spotted Creature with the child. "What's happened?" she demanded, brushing ash from her cloak. Ginny explained quickly, her voice taut with fear. She cried, not like before. It shook the whole room. Then the mirror, her reflection didn't match her. It wasn't her, Andromeda. Andromeda's expression darkened. She set her wand on the table, already whispering detection charms. "It's not possession. At least not yet. But something is tugging at her. Threads of magic wound around a child who should have none." She looked directly at Ginny. "This is deliberate. Someone is testing the boundaries of her mind." Ginny swallowed hard, her knuckles white around the chair. "It's him. The heir. He said her name through Harry's scar, I know it. He's reaching for her because she's theirs, Harry and Hermione's child. He thinks she's part of his game." Andromeda rocked back slightly, a flicker of unease in her gaze. "Blood carries power. Legacy carries weight. If he truly has Gaunt blood, then he believes the child is tied to it somehow. Whether true or not, that makes her his target." Creature shifted, holding Rose closer, his croaky voice fierce. "Creature will fight him if he comes. This house will not fall to snakes again." Ginny nodded, grateful but still trembling. She turned to Andromeda. "What do we do until Harry comes back? We can't just wait." Andromeda set her wand against Rose's forehead, muttering an incantation that left a faint golden shimmer on the baby's skin before fading. "This charm will slow his reach. But it won't stop him forever. You need to tell Harry immediately. The longer you wait, the stronger the bond becomes." At that very moment, deep in the underground tunnel beneath Hogwarts, Harry stumbled, gripping the damp stone wall as another wave of pain tore through his scar. Hermione caught his arm, alarm flooding her features. "Harry, what is it?" His voice was hoarse, almost breaking. "Rose." He's touching her again. "I can feel it." The others stopped dead in the narrow passage, the weight of those words pressing heavier than the stone above them. Ron's eyes burned with anger. "Then what are we waiting for? Forget Gaunt records. Let's get back to her now." Neville said nothing, but his jaw clenched, and in the dim torchlight Harry saw something unshakable in his friend's expression. The war was no longer about secrets or archives. It was about protecting the smallest life caught between them and the shadow rising to claim her. The tunnel spat Harry, Hermione, Ron, and Neville out into the cool night air beyond the greenhouses. The castle loomed behind them, its towers silent against the stars. None of them spoke as they mounted the thestrals waiting at the edge of the forest. There was no time for words, no time for doubts. Every second away from Grimald Place tightened the coil of fear in Harry's chest. The ride was a blur. Wind tore at Harry's hair as London drew closer. His scar pulsed like a drumbeat, each throb a reminder of the link stretching toward Rose. He clenched the reins harder, whispering to himself, "Hold on, Rosie. Daddy's coming." When they landed in the shadows of Grimald Place, Harry didn't wait for the others. He raced up the steps and burst through the front door. The smell of smoke from the hearth hit him, along with the sound of Rose's faint cries echoing through the hall. Ginny was already in the kitchen, her face pale but steady. Creature stood beside her, clutching Rose with surprising tenderness, while Andromeda Tonks hovered nearby, wand drawn. The golden shimmer from Andromeda's protective charm glowed faintly around Rose's small form, flickering as if resisting pressure from outside. Ginny's eyes widened with relief when she saw Harry. "You felt it too, didn't you?" Harry crossed the room in 3 strides, gently taking his daughter into his arms. The moment his hand touched her, the shimmer steadied, as if his presence pushed back whatever dark tendrils had been clawing at her. Rose's cries softened, her tiny fingers clutching at his cloak. "Yes," Harry said, voice raw. "He's reaching for her. Through me. Through everything I've fought to bury." Hermione was at his side, her gaze fixed on the child. "The heir has made his intentions clear. He doesn't just want power, he wants Rose." We have to understand why. Ron paced furiously, fists clenched. We don't need to understand why. We just need to stop him. If he wants her, then we hit him first, before he gets anywhere near her again. Neville's calm voice cut through the anger. If he's using bloodlines as a weapon, then Rose may represent more than just a target. To him, she might be proof of a future he wants to twist. Andromeda nodded gravely. The protection around her won't hold forever. I can layer stronger charms, but if he truly has Gaunt blood, then his reach might slip through magic older than any spell we know. Harry looked down at Rose, her small chest rising and falling in rhythm with his own heartbeat. A terrible thought pressed against him. Was his daughter cursed simply by being born? Had the war scarred him so deeply that even his child was not safe from its legacy? Hermione, sensing his turmoil, touched his shoulder. Harry, don't go there. She's not cursed. She's loved. And that will be our strength. Ginny's voice hardened, steel beneath her exhaustion. But love alone won't stop him. We need a plan. Ron turned to Harry. Then what's the move, mate? Do we stay and defend, or do we go after him? Harry's eyes flicked to Hermione, then back to Rose. His jaw set with grim determination. We can't wait for him to strike again. If he wants Rose, then we take the fight to him. But this time, we make sure it's on our terms. In the flickering firelight, the friends exchanged grim nods. The war they thought ended had found its way back into their lives. Not through armies or prophecy, but through the fragile heartbeat of a child. And far away, in the depths of his lair, the air of shadows felt the golden shimmer resist him. He laughed softly beneath his mask. You protect her well, Potter. But how long before your shield becomes your chain? The kitchen of Grimald Place had never felt so crowded, not with bodies but with tension. The fire crackled, shadows stretching long across the stone floor, as Harry set Rose back in Ginny's arms. She fussed faintly, then settled, her small head pressed against her mother's shoulder. The golden shimmer of Andromeda's protective charm was still faintly visible, pulsing like a heartbeat. Every flicker reminded them of the invisible enemy pressing against it, testing its strength. Hermione spread maps and scraps of parchment across the table, her quill scratching furiously as she sketched connections between names, events, and bloodlines. If the heir truly descends from Cassius Gaunt, then he believes Rose represents something more than a target. She's a symbol. The child of Harry Potter, survivor of the killing curse, and of me, a Muggle-born. She embodies the union he hates most. Neville nodded slowly. And if he can corrupt that symbol, twist it to his cause, then he strengthens his claim to power. Fear and legacy, that's all Voldemort ever used. Ron leaned on the table, his fists clenched. So what's the plan? Because I'm sick of dancing to his tune. We need to strike back before he tries this again. Harry's gaze was fixed on Rose, but his voice was calm even. We will. But rushing in without knowing what we're fighting will get us all killed. He's luring us, same as always. Ginny finally spoke, her tone cutting through the room like a blade. Then stop letting him pull the strings. You can't just react anymore, Harry. You need to decide where this fight happens and make him come to you. Hermione looked up from her notes, her eyes flashing with an idea. If it's bloodlines he craves, then we use that against him. There are still artifacts tied to the Gaunts, old relics, family possessions. They're dangerous, but if we find one, it could draw him out. Neville frowned. You mean bait? Put something he wants where we can control the fight. Ron gave a sharp nod. That's the first decent plan I've heard tonight. Make him chase us for once. Harry remained silent for a long moment, weighing the risk. His scar pulsed faintly, reminding him that the heir was always listening, always lurking. Finally, he said, if we do this, it has to be absolute. One chance, no mistakes. Rose's safety comes before everything. Ginny held their daughter tighter. Then she and I stay here. I'll guard her with my life. Andromeda set her wand down, her voice firm. Not alone, you won't. I'll stay too. Between us, creature, and the wards, no curse will break this house easily. Hermione tapped her quill against the parchment, then circled a name. There's one relic that still exists outside of Ministry control, the Gaunt ring. It was cursed, yes, but Dumbledore destroyed the Horcrux in it years ago. What's left might still carry power. If we find where it was hidden after the war, it could be exactly what we need to draw him out. Harry's eyes narrowed at the mention of the ring. He remembered Dumbledore's blackened hand, the way the curse had almost killed him. That thing nearly destroyed the strongest wizard I've ever known. Using it as bait could destroy us too. Hermione met his gaze steadily. Or it could save Rose. Silence settled again. Ron shifted uncomfortably, muttering, "Merlin's beard, this just keeps getting worse." Neville broke it with quiet resolve. "Then it's decided. We find the ring. If it still exists, it's the only lead we have." Harry finally nodded, his jaw tight. "We'll need every ally we can trust. This fight isn't just ours anymore. If the heir wants legacy, then we show him what ours really means." As they leaned over the table, plotting their next steps, Rose stirred faintly in Ginny's arms, her tiny hand reaching out into the air as though grasping for something unseen. And though she was too young for words, Harry felt it in his bones. She was already part of this war, whether they wished it or not. The night was moonless, the air sharp as Harry, Hermione, Ron, and Neville stood at the edge of a forgotten graveyard near Little Hangleton. The place reeked of decay and history, the very soil heavy with dark memories. It was here, Hermione explained, that the Gaunt family had lived in squalor before collapsing into obscurity. Somewhere among these graves, whispers said, the remnants of their legacy still lingered. Ron shifted uneasily, his wand already out. "I hate this place. It feels like walking straight into a nightmare." Neville scanned the overgrown headstones, his voice low but steady. "Nightmares leave traces. This ground remembers what it's seen. Dark magic clings to places like this." Hermione opened her notebook, the one she had filled with Dumbledore's scattered notes and her own research. The ring was destroyed as a Horcrux, yes, but wizards often fail to understand that destruction doesn't erase resonance. An object like that doesn't simply fade away. The magic remains like a scar. Harry's scar pulsed faintly at the word, a reminder of how scars tied people and objects to destinies they never asked for. "So where do we begin?" Before Hermione could answer, the ground shuddered. The gnarled branches of nearby trees rattled as if in protest, and a low hum carried on the wind. Out of the mist, shadows flickered. "Company," Ron muttered, his wand raised. Figures emerged, cloaked and hooded, their faces hidden but their intent obvious. There were 6 of them, their wands already glowing with muted curses. At their head stood a taller figure, his voice deep and laced with cruel confidence. "Potter, we knew you would come. The bloodline calls you as surely as it calls our master." Harry stepped forward, shielding Hermione and Neville with a subtle motion. "Then you know this ends with me. The heir won't get what he wants." The leader laughed softly. "On the contrary, you've already delivered yourself to us. The ring belongs to the rightful bloodline, not to thieves and half-bloods." Hermione's quill scratched a hurried note even as she lifted her wand. "That confirms it. They're after the ring. It really is still here." Neville's eyes hardened. "Then we can't let them touch it." The first curse shot through the night, a sickly green that Harry countered with a shield charm, so forceful it sent sparks crackling across the graves. The fight erupted instantly, curses flying, the air filled with flashes of light that illuminated the broken headstones. Ron struck first, a disarming spell that sent one enemy's wand flying into the dark. Hermione cast a freezing charm, binding another attacker's legs to the ground, stone rising to clutch at his ankles. Neville's wand cut sharp arcs, his spells earthy and raw, vines bursting from the soil to lash around their opponents. Harry's focus locked on the leader. The man was skilled, his movements sharp, his curses heavy with practiced malice. Sparks flew as their spells clashed, the hum of power building until it felt like the earth itself trembled. "Tell me where he is," Harry demanded, forcing the man back with a blast of raw energy. "Tell me what the heir wants with my daughter." The leader's hood fell back, revealing pale features twisted into a sneer. "Your child is the key. The blood of the conqueror mixed with filth. He will cleanse her and claim her for the new age." Harry's fury surged, but Hermione's voice cut through the chaos. "Harry, the crypt." She pointed to a broken stone structure half buried in vines. A faint golden glow leaked through the cracks in its door. The leader noticed too, his expression turning wild with desperation. "The ring." The battle shifted instantly. Their enemies lunged for the crypt, but Ron and Neville intercepted, curses colliding in bursts of blinding light. Harry sprinted toward the glow, Hermione beside him, their hearts pounding in unison. The crypt door resisted at first, wards crackling with ancient power, but together they forced it open. The inside was choked with dust and darkness, but on a pedestal of cracked marble sat the object they had come for. The Gaunt ring. Its stone fractured, its band warped, but its aura undeniable. It pulsed with a strange, half-alive energy, calling to them like a whisper from another world. Hermione whispered, awe and fear in equal measure. It survived. Behind them, the leader screamed in rage, curses flying harder, the night splitting with shouts and the crash of magic. Harry reached out, his hand trembling as the pull of the ring clawed at him, dredging up memories of Dumbledore's blackened hand, of temptation, of death. He hesitated, every instinct screaming at him not to touch it. But Rose's face burned in his mind. He closed his fist around the ring. A shockwave burst outward, slamming every fighter in the graveyard to the ground. The night went silent, save for the low, echoing hum of something ancient and hungry awakening once again. The shockwave rolled through the graveyard like thunder trapped beneath the earth. Dust rained from the trees, headstones cracked, and every wizard present, friend and foe alike, was thrown back against the ground. For several long seconds, silence consumed the night, broken only by the low hum radiating from the ring in Harry's hand. Hermione was the first to recover, her voice trembling but urgent. "Harry, drop it. You can't hold that for long. It's not meant for mortal hands." Harry tried, but his fingers wouldn't obey. The ring clung to him like iron fused to flesh, its fractured stone pulsing against his palm. Heat surged through his arm, not burning, but cold, like liquid ice threading through his veins. His vision blurred, flashes of impossible images flickering before his eyes. He saw Rose older, standing in shadows. He saw a battlefield scarred with fire. He saw the heir, faceless but laughing, arms outstretched as if welcoming him home. Ron scrambled to his feet, wand raised against the cloaked followers who were slowly regaining themselves. "Hermione, he's not letting go." Neville stepped closer, his face pale but steady. "He can't. The ring's bound to him now. That kind of magic doesn't release willingly." The leader of the cloaked men staggered upright, his sneer twisted into something almost reverent. "The blood accepts it. The Potter line carries the mark, as it was always meant to. He holds what belongs to our master." Harry's scar seared suddenly, the pain white-hot. He fell to one knee, clutching his head as the hum grew louder, vibrating in his skull. Hermione rushed to him, kneeling at his side, her hand gripping his shoulder. "Harry, listen to me. Fight it. You are stronger than this. The ring feeds on weakness, on desire. Do not give it what it wants." Through the fog of pain, Harry heard her voice like an anchor. But beneath it, another voice hissed in his mind. It was deep, serpentine, echoing with the weight of centuries. "Blood of the Savior. Blood of the tainted. You are mine, and through you the child." The images returned sharper now, rose again, but this time her eyes glowed with the same eerie light as the fractured stone in the ring. She was not crying, not frightened, but standing still, silent, almost regal. The vision chilled Harry to his core. "No!" he roared aloud, forcing his mind back to the present. The force of his resistance caused a spark to burst from the ring, scattering energy across the crypt walls. The leader cried out in awe, his men shielding their eyes. Hermione whispered fiercely, "You're fighting it, Harry. Keep going. Don't let it tell you what you are." Ron shouted, blasting another attacker who lunged toward the crypt. "We need to get out of here now, before every dark wizard in Britain feels that bloody shockwave." Neville cast a binding spell to hold the last conscious enemy, his voice grim. "He's right. The heir will already know." Harry staggered to his feet, still clutching the ring, his face pale with sweat. "Then we can't leave it behind. If the heir gets this, Rose is lost." Hermione looked at him, horror in her eyes. "And if you keep it, we may lose you instead." For a moment their gazes locked, unspoken fear passing between them. Then Harry's jaw tightened. "We'll find a way. Together." The group fought their way out of the graveyard, curses flying as the remaining cloaked figures tried to block their path. With every spell Harry cast, the ring seemed to answer, amplifying his magic, but twisting it too. His shields flared too violently, his disarming charms cracked stone, his stunning spells left scorch marks where they struck. By the time they stumbled back into the cover of the forest, the graveyard was in ruins, smoke curling from shattered monuments. The ring's hum had quieted but had not stopped, vibrating faintly in Harry's clenched hand. Far away, in a chamber lit only by the dim glow of enchanted fire, the heir sat motionless on a carved throne of stone. His followers knelt before him, but he paid them no mind. His head tilted back, his eyes closed as he breathed in sharply, like a man savoring a long-awaited taste. A smile curved his lips, thin and cold. "He has touched it," the heir whispered, his voice carrying across the chamber. "The ring wakes again, and through it the bloodline bends. The child will be ours." The chamber erupted in hisses of devotion from his followers, but the heir raised a hand for silence. His smile widened, eyes glinting with cruel satisfaction. "Let Potter cling to it. The ring will not serve him. It will consume him. And when he falls, the child will already belong to me." The old drawing room of Grimald Place glowed dimly under candlelight, shadows crawling along the carved walls as Harry slumped heavily into an armchair. His hand, still wrapped around the gaunt ring, throbbed as though a second heart beat within it. Every pulse sent a faint vibration through the air, unsettling even the silence. Hermione paced restlessly, her eyes darting to Harry, then back to the stacks of books she had already dragged from the shelves. "We need answers, Harry. That ring isn't just dangerous, it's tethered to you now. If we don't find a way to sever the bond, it will bleed you dry." Ron dropped into the chair opposite Harry, his face pale and drawn. "Or worse, it'll twist him. You all saw what it did to Dumbledore. And now it's singing in Harry's hand like it's found its best mate." Neville leaned against the fireplace, arms folded. "And the heir will know. If the shockwave reached him, then he's already making plans." Harry shifted forward, his voice low, ragged. "I saw him. Not clearly, but I felt him. And I saw Rose. Older, standing in shadows. The ring showed me what it wants, what he wants. He thinks she's part of this legacy, part of his war." Ginny, who had been silent until now, tightened her grip on Rose, who lay asleep against her shoulder. Her eyes burned with protective fire. "Then we end this before he ever lays a hand on her. I don't care how cursed that ring is, we destroy it." Hermione stopped pacing, her jaw set. "It's not that simple. It was already destroyed as a Horcrux. What's left is not something we can break with brute force. It's raw legacy, Harry. An imprint of the Gaunt line, sustained through generations of obsession with blood purity. Destroying that kind of magic means unraveling centuries of history." Ron groaned. "Brilliant. So we either let Harry keep hold of a ticking curse, or we try to tear apart wizarding history. Sounds simple enough." Harry's hand tightened involuntarily around the ring. His knuckles whitened as the stone pulsed again, visions teasing the edges of his mind. Whispers of power, flashes of faces he did not know. He forced them back, meeting Hermione's gaze. "Then we don't waste time. You said before we need to use it as bait. If it's bound to me, then fine. I'll carry it. But we'll set the trap." Neville frowned. "Carrying it might be worse than using it. Every moment you hold on to it, the heir gains a foothold in your mind." Ginny's voice cut like steel. "Then I'll carry it." The room froze. All eyes snapped to her, shock plain on their faces. She shifted Rose gently into Andromeda's arms and stepped forward, her hand outstretched. "I know what cursed objects do better than anyone. Tom Riddle's diary nearly killed me. I know how they whisper, how they dig into you. And I know how to resist them." Harry's eyes widened, horror striking him. "No, Ginny. Absolutely not. I won't let you risk that again." Her gaze held his, unwavering. "You don't get to decide this alone. We're in this together, Harry. If you carry it, you'll burn yourself out before we even find him. Let me share the weight. I've survived it once. I'll survive it again." Hermione hesitated, torn between logic and loyalty. "She's right, Harry. She has experience with cursed objects. And the more we spread the burden, the less likely any one of us will be completely consumed." Ron's jaw tightened. "If anyone's carrying that thing besides you, mate, it's me. I won't let my sister." "Stop!" Ginny snapped, her voice ringing with fire. "This isn't about pride or family debts. It's about survival. Rose needs both her parents. If Harry breaks, we're all lost. So yes, I'll carry it, because I refuse to stand aside while he slowly destroys himself." The silence that followed was heavy, the ring's faint hum the only sound. Harry looked down at his hand, at the cursed relic chained to him by fate, and then back up at Ginny. Her determination was unyielding, the same fire that had kept her alive through the war burning brighter now. He swallowed hard, then finally nodded. We share the burden. But the moment either of us shows weakness, the other takes it back. No secrets, no lies. Hermione exhaled, relief and dread tangled in her voice. Then we have our plan. But Harry, Ginny, understand this. The ring is not a weapon. It's bait. If we let it dictate our moves, then the heir has already won. Rose stirred faintly in Andromeda's arms, her tiny hand clutching the air as though reaching for something unseen. None of them noticed how the ring pulsed faintly in answer. The chamber of the heir stretched deep beneath the earth, its stone walls veined with glowing runes that pulsed like a heartbeat. At the center sat a circular pool of black water, smooth as glass until the heir raised his hand. Ripples spread outward, and visions shimmered across its surface. Flashes of the graveyard, Harry clutching the gaunt ring, Ginny standing fierce at his side, the child cradled safely in her arms. A hush fell over the gathered followers. Cloaked figures lined the chamber, their heads bowed low, waiting for their master to speak. The heir's voice was soft but laced with venom. The ring has chosen. It binds itself to Potter's blood, but through him, the child calls to me. Already the threads tighten. The girl is no ordinary infant. She is the fracture and the bridge. She is the undoing of their world and the beginning of mine. One of the followers dared to raise his head. Master, shall we strike while they are weakened? Potter cannot hold the ring without it breaking him. If we press now, we could seize both him and the child. The heir's lips curled into a thin smile, cold and deliberate. No. Potter believes himself clever, believes he wields the ring as bait. Let him cling to that illusion. The longer he carries it, the more he becomes mine. His wife too, she is brave, foolish, scarred by the past. Her strength will crumble when the whispers grow. I do not need to tear them apart. The ring will do so for me. Another follower leaned forward on his knees. And the child, master? What would you have us do when she is taken? The heir rose from his throne, his cloak sweeping across the stone floor like liquid shadow. He stood over the pool, staring at the vision of Rose, her small hand stretched out as if she could already feel his gaze. For the first time, his tone softened, almost reverent. She will not be taken. She will come. The blood in her veins will call her to me, as it called the ring to Potter. She will walk willingly into my hand, because she will not know the difference between salvation and destruction. The chamber hissed with awe, the followers murmuring their devotion. But the heir silenced them with a single raised hand. Their sanctuary lies in Grimald Place, but even ancient wards rot with time. They think themselves safe, hidden behind walls built by traitors and protected by half-blood charms. We will unravel them piece by piece. Not with force, but with memory. He turned, his eyes gleaming like twin shards of obsidian. Bring me what remains of the Gaunt bloodline. Search the ruins, scour the vaults, turn the earth itself if you must. There are relics still sleeping, forgotten by fools. The ring alone is not enough. We will weave the bloodline whole again, and through it, claim the child. The followers bowed deeper, their chants echoing through the stone hall. But when the noise died away, the heir lingered over the pool, watching Rose's image with quiet hunger. Potter thinks he fights for her. He does not understand. He is only preparing her for me. The child will inherit more than his scar. She will inherit destiny. The pool went still, the image fading back into blackness. The heir's smile sharpened. The hunt had only begun. The morning at Grimald Place was unnaturally quiet. Even the creak of the old house seemed subdued, as though the walls themselves were wary of what lay within. Harry sat at the long kitchen table, a mug of untouched tea cooling at his elbow. His hand rested on the table, fingers still curled tightly around the gaunt ring. The hum had softened overnight, but it never stopped, vibrating faintly through his skin like a second pulse. Ginny entered, Rose balanced on her hip. Her eyes flicked immediately to the ring, then to Harry's drawn face. "You didn't sleep," she said, not as a question but a fact. Harry shook his head. "Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him. The heir. And Rose. Always Rose. He wants her, Ginny. He wants her more than he ever wanted me." Ginny shifted Rose into her other arm and crossed the room, setting the baby into the old crib Andromeda had placed near the hearth. Rose stirred, blinking awake, her small hand reaching up as if to grasp something unseen. Ginny knelt by Harry's chair, her hand brushing his. That's why we fight. But Harry, if the ring is already doing this to you, then maybe it's time we test what we agreed on. Harry looked at her, his eyes shadowed. You mean you want to carry it? Ginny's expression was steady, determined. We promised. No secrets. No lies. If it's eating away at you, then it's my turn. Hermione entered just as the words hung in the air, her arms full of books that looked centuries old. I'm glad you're both considering it. The longer the ring binds to one person, the deeper its claws sink. Passing it between you might delay its control. But understand this, it won't stop trying to twist you. It adapts. It learns. Ron followed her in, his mouth set in a grim line. So what, we just keep handing it back and forth until it drives you both mad? Brilliant plan. Neville, trailing behind, added quietly. It's still better than letting it devour one of them completely. Harry exhaled, the weight of inevitability pressing down on him. He opened his fist slowly, revealing the cracked band and fractured stone. Even in the dim kitchen, it gleamed faintly, as though it carried its own light. He placed it carefully on the table, and for the first time he saw it without touching it. The absence of its hum left a hollow ache in his palm. Ginny reached for it. Her hand trembled only slightly as she lifted it, closing her fingers around the cursed metal. The hum returned instantly, faint but insistent, and her eyes flickered shut as the first whisper slid into her mind. Blood remembers. Blood endures. You are stronger than him. You can wield me. Her breath caught, but she forced her eyes open, meeting Harry's gaze with fire. It's nothing I can't handle. Hermione set the books down with a sharp thump. Don't underestimate it, Ginny. That's how it wins. She flipped open a cracked leather tome, its pages brittle. Listen to this. The Gaunt heirlooms were vessels of obsession, built not to serve but to bind. Those who touched them became the tether. The relics live as long as their bearers yield. Ron muttered, That's comforting. So now both of you are tethers. Ginny straightened, her jaw set. Better both of us than just Harry. Neville moved closer to the crib, glancing down at Rose. Then we move quickly. If the heir is after more relics, we need to find them first. Every piece he claims brings him closer to her. Harry leaned forward, his voice low but certain. Then we go on the hunt. We've been reacting long enough. It's time we take the fight to him. At that moment, Rose stirred again, her small hand reaching toward the ring in Ginny's fist. Ginny quickly shifted it out of sight, but Hermione's sharp intake of breath echoed in the room. She can sense it, Hermione whispered. Even at her age, she's tied to it. The heir isn't just after her for what she represents. She's connected to this magic already. The group exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time since the war had ended, Harry felt the same dread he once carried at Hogwarts, that they were standing at the edge of something vast, dark, and inevitable. And this time, the future of his daughter hung in the balance. The first night Ginny carried the ring was suffocating. Grimald Place had always been heavy with shadows, but that night they pressed closer, thick and watchful. She lay in bed beside Harry, Rose asleep in the cradle at their side, but every time she closed her eyes the whispers stirred. Blood is power. You are stronger than him. Stronger than all of them. Ginny shifted, pressing her hand against her temple, but the voice seeped deeper, curling into her thoughts like smoke. It did not tempt her with fear, as it had Harry, nor with visions of loss. It tempted her pride. It coaxed her into imagining strength she had always yearned for. The strength to protect her family, to never again be helpless in the shadow of someone else's power. She dreamt of the diary, of Tom Riddle's cool, persuasive words. She remembered how easily he had slipped past her defenses, how she had once believed she was the one in control. That memory burned like iron, and she fought it with everything she had. You resisted once. You can resist again. She repeated it silently until her jaw ached from clenching. Beside her, Harry stirred. His hand reached across the sheets, finding hers. Ginny, he murmured, his voice thick with exhaustion. You're awake. She squeezed his fingers, grounding herself. So are you. He gave a humorless laugh. With that thing in this house, I don't think I'll sleep again. His eyes flicked to her hand, still curled tightly around the ring. What's it saying to you? Ginny hesitated, then whispered, that I'm strong. Stronger than you. That I could protect Rose in ways you never could. Harry's face tightened, but he didn't look away. That's how it works. It finds the cracks. With me, it was fear. With you, it's pride. Ginny stared at the ceiling, her voice quiet but steady. I won't let it win. I won't let him use me again. Harry leaned closer, pressing his forehead gently to hers. Then we'll fight it together. No secrets, remember? She nodded, though the whispers did not stop. By morning, her resolve was worn thin but unbroken. She descended to the kitchen, the ring still clenched in her hand, and found Hermione already there, surrounded by parchment and maps. You didn't sleep, Hermione observed, not looking up. Ginny poured herself tea with a shaking hand. Neither did you. Hermione finally raised her eyes, sharp and searching. What did it show you? Ginny met her gaze squarely. Not images. Just words. Promises. It thinks I want power. Hermione's lips pressed into a thin line. It knows you too well. That's why it's dangerous. We need to move fast before it shapes those whispers into something harder to resist. She pushed a parchment toward her. I think I've found our next lead. The Gaunt family wasn't just obsessed with the ring. They hoarded trinkets, heirlooms passed down like sacred objects. One was a locket, handed off generations before Riddle turned it into a Horcrux. After it was destroyed, rumors spread that another locket still existed. A twin, crafted for the family before Salazar's line dwindled. Ginny frowned, sipping her tea. And you think the heir is after it? Hermione nodded. I think he's after all of it. Every scrap of his family's history, reforged into something whole. If he manages that, he won't just claim Rose. He'll claim every witch and wizard still clinging to blood purity. Harry entered then, his eyes shadowed but resolute. Then we find it first. He glanced at Ginny, his jaw tightening as he noticed the faint tremor in her hand. He didn't speak of it, but his eyes said enough. Ron and Neville arrived moments later, and the group gathered around the table. Hermione spread maps across the wood, her quill circling a coastal region in Cornwall. If the locket exists, it's here. Old records point to a Gaunt relative who fled after the family collapsed. The ruins of his manor still stand. Ron leaned back, arms crossed. So another cursed ruin full of traps and nightmares. Lovely. Neville's voice was quiet but firm. If the heir is looking too, we won't be the only ones there. Best be ready for a fight. Harry straightened, the weight of determination sharpening his features. Then we leave tonight. Before he gets there first. Rose stirred faintly upstairs, her cry carrying down the hall, thin but insistent. Ginny turned immediately, her heart tugged between her daughter and the cursed metal burning faintly in her palm. The ring hummed as though amused. Blood calls to blood. She will follow. Ginny closed her fist tighter, her face set. She would not let it win. The sea crashed violently against the cliffs of Cornwall, throwing spray into the night air. A narrow path wound its way down toward a blackened ruin perched precariously above the waves. The walls of the manor, once proud, now slumped inward as though trying to swallow themselves. But even in decay, the place radiated malice. Harry stood at the edge of the cliff with his cloak pulled tightly around him, the wind tugging at his hair. Ginny stood at his side, Rose left safely behind under Andromeda's care, though her absence gnawed at Ginny's chest. Hermione, Ron, and Neville followed close, each carrying the tension of people who knew they were about to step into something foul. This is it, Hermione said, consulting the parchment she had copied from a ministry record. The last known property of Morphin Gaunt's cousin. When the family fell apart, this place was abandoned. But old blood doesn't die quietly. Ron eyed the ruin with a grimace. Looks about as cheerful as a Dementor's holiday home. Neville's gaze was sharper, his wand already in his hand. It's alive, he murmured. Not like the plants I tend. This place has a memory. It doesn't want us here. Ginny felt the ring thrum against her palm, its whispers quickening as if excited. Home, it crooned. Home. Harry noticed her grip tightening and gently touched her arm. Stay close. The group descended the path, their boots crunching against gravel slick with seawater. The ruin loomed larger with each step, windows yawning open like empty eyes. At the threshold, Hermione paused, tracing the faint shimmer of a ward in the air. Protective spells, she whispered. ancient and layered. Not designed to keep people out, but to keep something in. Ron groaned. Why is it never simple? With careful precision, Hermione unraveled the ward, her wand movements meticulous. The shimmer broke like a ripple across water, and the group stepped inside. The interior smelled of damp stone and rot. The ceiling had collapsed in places, letting moonlight spill across the floor, but the walls bore carvings. Snakes coiled around runes, their eyes filled with dust that glittered faintly in the dark. Salazar's legacy, Hermione whispered, running her fingers along the carvings. This isn't just a home. It was a shrine. Harry's eyes scanned the shadows. Then the locket's here. Before anyone could respond, the temperature dropped. A low hiss slithered through the air, reverberating against the walls. Neville raised his wand higher, his jaw set. Something's moving. Out of the shadows stepped cloaked figures, their faces hidden, wands already drawn. Their presence was silent but heavy, as if the ruin itself had summoned them. The heir's followers. One voice broke through, sharp and cruel. Potter. Just where he told us you would be. Harry's chest tightened, but he kept his wand steady. The heir sent you. The figure chuckled, lowering his hood just enough to reveal pale, sunken features twisted with devotion. To claim what belongs to him. You think you hunt relics. But everything here already sings for the heir. Ginny felt the ring burn hot, as though agreeing. For an instant, her hand twitched with the urge to let it guide her wand, to strike with its borrowed strength. She clenched her jaw, forcing the thought away. Hermione's voice cut through the tension. There are 5 of us. You don't stand a chance. The followers' grin widened. You still don't understand. You're not fighting us. You're fighting the house itself. The carvings along the walls glowed faintly, the snake's eyes lighting with eerie green fire. The ruin shuddered, dust raining from the ceiling. Harry realized too late what they had walked into. It wasn't merely a shrine. It was a vessel, a living relic bound to the Gaunt bloodline. The floor split with a violent crack, revealing a chamber below. A golden glint caught the light for a brief second before vanishing into the dark. The locket. Hermione gasped, already moving forward. There! I saw it. But the ground buckled again, and the cloaked followers moved to block the path, their wands raised high. Harry raised his own, his voice steady despite the roar of the sea outside and the whispers clawing at his mind. Then we fight. The ruin itself seemed to breathe, the ancient bloodline waking from its slumber as spells lit the night. The ruin quaked under their feet, the floorboards splitting and groaning as if protesting their intrusion. Dust and debris rained from the ceiling, mingling with the salty spray from the cliffs outside. Every carving along the walls seemed to stir, serpentine eyes glinting with unnatural light, as if the house itself were alive and aware of intruders. Harry, Ginny, Hermione, Ron, and Neville moved carefully, wands raised, hearts pounding. The cloaked figures of the heir's followers pressed toward them, their steps silent but deliberate, eyes glinting with devotion and malice. You can't fight at all, one of the followers hissed, stepping forward as the floor beneath them shifted. The house itself protects what belongs to the bloodline. Ginny's grip on the ring tightened involuntarily, and for a brief moment, she felt its hum surge through her veins. The whispers were insistent, coiling around her thoughts. Strike first. Lead. Command. Power is yours. She shook her head, forcing the ring's influence back, and raised her wand. Not today. Neville muttered an incantation under his breath, and green vines erupted from cracks in the stone floor, lashing out at the followers. The impact threw 2 of them against a wall, but the others moved like shadows, unharmed. Hermione's voice cut sharply. Overhead. Stones from the collapsed ceiling began to shift, forming jagged pillars that threatened to crush them. With a series of precise spells, she froze the stones in place, creating barriers between them and the attackers. Harry's eyes scanned the ruins, catching sight of the glint of gold, the locket they had come for, half buried beneath rubble in the lower chamber. We need that locket, he shouted over the roar of the house and sea. Neville, cover the front. Hermione, Ron, with me. They advanced cautiously, wading through falling debris as the floor groaned and twisted. Each step closer to the locket felt heavier, the whispers from Ginny's hand growing louder, more demanding. The ring seemed to pulse with every heartbeat, urging her to act, to strike before the others could. The followers converged on them, a blur of black robes and gleaming wands. Spells collided with the group's defenses in bursts of light and fire. Harry ducked under a curse, his own wand blasting back in a precise counterstrike. Ginny, fighting the urge to let the ring guide her, fired a stunning spell that sent one follower sprawling against the wall. Ron and Neville worked together, combining a binding spell and an uprooted pillar, holding off two more attackers. Hermione moved like a shadow, precise and quick, disarming another with barely a flick of her wand. Then the floor gave way beneath Harry's feet, plunging him into the darkness below. Ginny screamed, but instinctively, the ring pulsed in response, humming against her palm like it had anticipated his fall. Without thinking, she lunged, casting a spell to create a protective cushion of air. Harry landed hard but uninjured, the locket's glow now directly in sight. Hermione and Ron descended after him, Neville holding the front against the remaining followers above. The locket sat atop a stone pedestal, its aura alive, radiating the same dark pulse as the ring in Ginny's hand. Harry stepped forward, but the pedestal shuddered violently, the ruin itself resisting his approach. The carvings along the walls writhed, snakes twisting, eyes glowing bright green. The locket seemed to hover slightly, responding to the magic of the ring that Ginny still carried. Ginny's breath came in short, controlled bursts as the whispers climbed to a crescendo. Power is yours. Take it. Lead. Claim. Harry reached out first, grasping her wrist. Ginny, don't. Not together. We do this together, but carefully. They exchanged a tense glance. Then in unison, their hands met over the locket. The ring in Ginny's hand pulsed violently, and a surge of energy shot through the chamber. The heir's followers screamed as the floor buckled beneath them, and the ruin seemed to convulse, ancient magic clashing with their combined will. The locket's glow stabilized, the pedestal falling silent, and for a fleeting moment, the ruins themselves were quiet, as if waiting to see which force would dominate, the heir's legacy or the Potter-Hermione-Ginny alliance. Above, the remaining cloaked followers scrambled, realizing the tide had shifted. And far away, in a shadowed chamber, the heir's eyes narrowed, sensing the awakening. His lips curved into a thin, cold smile. They're beginning to understand. But understanding is not enough. Soon, the child will come to me. The air inside the ruined Gaunt manor was thick with the taste of magic, old, bitter, and unyielding. Harry, Ginny, Hermione, Ron, and Neville crouched around the pedestal where the locket now rested, its dull golden glow pulsing faintly in tandem with the ring in Ginny's hand. For a moment, all five of them held their breath, waiting, listening. Above them, the surviving followers hesitated, their courage faltering as the ancient magic of the ruin resisted their advance. The floor groaned and shifted, loose stones tumbling downward, forcing them back. Harry bent over the locket, wand at the ready. We can't just take it. Whatever protections are on this, it will kill us if we aren't careful. Hermione crouched beside him, eyes scanning the inscriptions carved into the pedestal. The pedestal itself is bound to the bloodline. Any forceful removal triggers a defensive spell. But if we synchronize our magic with the ring and with each other, we can bypass it. Ginny's hand trembled slightly, the ring thrumming against her palm. She closed her eyes, focusing, ignoring the seductive whispers. Take it. Lead. Power. The urge to wield it, to dominate the ruin and force the locket into submission, was nearly overwhelming. Remember, Harry said softly, we're together in this. No one acts alone. We take it as one. The group nodded, forming a tight circle. Hermione began to chant a counterspell, her voice low but steady, weaving protective layers around them. Neville followed, drawing on his connection to the earth, channeling the ruin's energy into the circle, stabilizing the floor beneath them. Ron and Harry mirrored their magic, reinforcing the bonds and shielding each other from sudden bursts of the ruin's defensive magic. Ginny's eyes snapped open, her voice steady but firm. On 3. 1. 2. 3. In unison, they raised their wands, the combined energy a force of raw determination and pure intent. The ring in Ginny's hand pulsed violently, thrumming in resonance with the locket. For a moment the room shivered, a low groan echoing from the walls, then the glow of the locket intensified, spinning slowly as if alive. A sudden force shot from the pedestal, and the group was thrown backward. Dust filled the chamber, and shadows stretched like hands trying to claw at them. Harry scrambled to his feet, shielding Ginny with his body. Keep going. Don't let it push us back. Hermione's counterspell flared, meeting the locket's energy head-on. The glow stabilized, the spinning slowing, then finally the locket floated upward, free from the pedestal's ancient hold. Ginny reached forward, the ring's hum aligning with the locket's pulse. Her fingers closed around it, and the whispers quieted, as if temporarily sated. Above, the remaining followers froze, staring in disbelief. Their chants faltered, and one after another, they fled, the ruin rejecting them as though protecting the bloodline from outsiders. Harry exhaled, leaning heavily on his wand. We did it. Ginny lowered the locket carefully onto a cloth Hermione had pulled from her bag. The ring in her other hand had quieted but remained warm against her skin, a reminder of the power still alive within them. Hermione examined the locket. It's stable now, but it's not safe to carry it loosely. It's alive, bound to the Gaunt bloodline. Whoever possesses it can influence the rest. Neville frowned. Then we keep it hidden until we know what to do next. If the heir knows it's moved, he'll come for it. Harry's scar burned faintly, a cold reminder that the heir was already aware, sensing the disturbance from afar. He glanced at Ginny, her face pale but determined. We've bought time. Not much, but enough to plan the next move. Outside, the wind howled over the cliffs, carrying the faint sound of waves crashing against jagged rocks. And far away, in a chamber shrouded in shadow, the heir's eyes snapped open, narrowing. His lips curved into a thin, cruel smile. They have taken it, he whispered, voice low and deadly. Very well. Let them enjoy their small victory. The child will still come to me. And when she does, nothing will save them. The journey back to Grimald Place was tense and silent. The group moved quickly through the countryside, avoiding main roads, every shadow and sound amplified by nerves. The locket lay wrapped in Hermione's cloth, resting lightly in her hands, but its presence weighed on everyone more than they let themselves admit. Once inside the familiar, darkened walls of the house, Hermione placed the locket on a small, reinforced table in the drawing room. Candles flickered around it, though even their light seemed muted, as though the room itself feared the relic's aura. Harry sank into a chair, running his hand over his face. It's done. The locket is safe for now. Ginny, still clutching the gaunt ring, sat nearby, her eyes dark with fatigue. Safe isn't enough. I can feel it. It wants more. The moment we let our guard down, it'll start influencing us again. Hermione nodded, setting her wand beside the locket. It's alive in a way most magical objects aren't. It has memory, ambition. It knows the heir is aware of its movement, and it will try to guide us, subtly, through thoughts and urges until we make a mistake. Ron sank into a chair across the room, groaning. So now we're babysitting not just a relic, but a mind-altering relic that wants us dead. Fantastic. Neville leaned forward, eyes narrowing. We have to set boundaries. The ring with Ginny, the locket here. No one else touches them until we know more. If the heir is already tracking these objects, any rash move could cost us. Harry's jaw tightened. And Rose. We have to keep her safe above all else. If the heir senses her, all our efforts could be for nothing. Ginny's fingers unconsciously tightened around the ring. She felt the faint hum again, subtle but insistent, whispering of strength and control. She shut her eyes, forcing herself to breathe slowly. I won't let it reach her. I won't let it take me over. Not like it tried with you, Harry. Harry reached across, placing a hand over hers. We're in this together. Both of us. Hermione studied the locket closely. There's something else, she said finally. It's not just a vessel. The Gaunt bloodline's power is woven into it. Whoever possesses it can sense the others connected to the line. The ring, the locket, and Rose herself, they're all linked. That's why the heir is drawn to them. And that's why we have to be careful. Ron leaned back, arms crossed. So what you're saying is, the minute the heir wants Rose, we're walking into a trap. Hermione nodded grimly. Exactly. And the longer we hold the objects, the more the heir will anticipate our moves. We need a plan. Neville's voice was quiet but firm. Then we find allies. People who can help us counteract the heir's reach, magical barriers, charms, protective spells. We can't face him blind. Ginny's eyes flicked to the ring in her hand. And we can't let him influence us before we're ready. I've felt it tonight. It wants me to make mistakes, to weaken our defenses. We can't let that happen. Harry nodded, resolve hardening. Then we prepare. We strengthen the wards, we find help, and we watch every move. The heir may have power, but he underestimates how far we'll go to protect Rose. Rose stirred in her crib, stretching her tiny arms as if sensing the tension in the room. Ginny leaned over, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Not now, little one. Not ever, if I can help it. The room fell into a quiet, tense silence. Outside, the wind rattled the old windows, echoing faintly like distant whispers. The heir's gaze, though unseen, had begun to reach toward them, and every heartbeat of Grimald Place seemed to thrum with the weight of what was coming. The battle for Rose, for the bloodline, and for the magical relics was only beginning. Grimald Place felt different in the days following their return. The familiar creaks and groans of the old house seemed amplified, almost aware, as if the walls themselves were listening. Harry, Ginny, Hermione, Ron, and Neville moved through the rooms with a sense of cautious purpose, each action deliberate, each spell measured. The locket and the ring were central to their every thought, their every plan. Hermione was busy in the drawing room, her wand tracing complex sigils in the air. Layers of protective enchantments began to form over the house, spells intertwined and overlapping, some ancient, others improvised. Every exit, every window, every entry point. We reinforce it all. The heir won't find us unprepared. Neville paced near the stairs, muttering plant-based defensive charms under his breath. The house will respond to the magic, he said. Every floorboard, every stair, every doorway can be made into a trap if we synchronize it with the wards. Ron sat in a chair, rubbing his temples. So we're turning the house into a giant magical booby trap. Brilliant. Just don't let the walls start throwing chairs at us, all right? Ginny's fingers absently twitched around the ring, its faint pulse echoing the tension in the room. It's not just the house we have to worry about. That thing. She lifted her hand slightly, showing Harry the ring. It's still whispering, trying to push me, to influence me. Harry moved beside her, placing a hand over hers. We've been through worse. We'll resist it together. We can't let it touch Rose, or any of us. Hermione glanced at both of them. The ring and the locket are connected. Whoever possesses them can feel the other. The heir will sense movement through them. That's why these defenses are critical. But the moment we relax even a little, the heir will strike directly. Neville nodded grimly. We should also prepare a contingency. If he tries to take Rose directly, we need escape routes, safe rooms, and protective enchantments specifically around her. Ginny's gaze softened as she moved toward the cradle, brushing a hand over Rose's forehead. No one will ever take her while I live, she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. The ring pulsed again, soft but insistent, reminding her of the power at her fingertips and the danger in yielding to it. Harry, watching her, felt the familiar sting of his scar, faint but sharp. The heir was already sensing the activity. He tightened his grip on his wand. We can't wait for him to come. We need to be ready to counterattack if he does. And we need to train Rose eventually. Even as a child, her connection to the bloodline will make her a target. Ron groaned. Great. Raising a kid with a target on her back. Fantastic parenting plan, that one. Hermione's expression hardened. It's not just about training. We need allies. Aurors, magical historians, those who understand ancient bloodline magic. We cannot fight this alone. As night fell over Grimald Place, the group completed the final wards. Candles burned with a protective glow, charms layered over every window and doorway. Outside, the wind carried a chill that seemed unnatural, almost aware. Every creak of the old house, every shadow in the corners, reminded them that the heir's presence was not far. And in a dark chamber far away, the heir's eyes opened, sharp and calculating. He watched a magical map, glowing faintly under the light of runes. His followers moved pieces carefully, indicating the positions of Potter and his allies, the locket and the ring. They are preparing, he whispered, voice low and chilling. Clever, but insufficient. The child is still within reach. Soon I will move, and the trap will be complete. Let them feel secure for now. Let them think they have gained time. Every moment strengthens their illusions, but it also strengthens the anticipation of their fall. Back at Grimald Place, Harry and Ginny finally stood together in the drawing room, exhaustion lining their faces but resolve firm. Ginny glanced at the ring, then at the locket. "We've done what we can for now, but I can feel him watching. The heir won't wait long." Harry nodded. "Then we stay ready. No mistakes. No hesitations. Whatever comes next, we face it as one." Rose stirred in her sleep, tiny fists curling, unaware of the battle already raging around her. But the moment her eyes opened, even slightly, Harry and Ginny felt it. The faintest pulse, as if she knew deep down that the world outside her crib was filled with unseen dangers, and that every heartbeat of hers carried the weight of destiny. The night was heavy and still, but a storm brewed far beyond the walls of Grimald Place. Harry, Ginny, Hermione, Ron, and Neville had spent hours strengthening the wards, studying the locket and the ring, and strategizing their next moves. Yet even in the relative quiet, there was an undeniable tension, a sense that something was coming. High above, in a tower cloaked in shadow, the heir's presence stretched outward like tendrils of ice. He did not need to move through the streets or forests. The magic of the bloodline, pulsing in the ring, the locket, and Rose herself guided him. He whispered across the miles, a soft, predatory sound that slithered into the corners of Grimald Place, brushing against the edges of protective wards. Ginny's hand trembled slightly over the ring. "He's close," she whispered. The hum of the ring surged, urgent and insistent. Its whispers no longer tempted her with power. They threatened, warning of a shadow already moving in pursuit. Harry rose, wand in hand, pacing the drawing room. "Then he's making his move. That's why it's getting stronger. Whatever he's planning, it's coming tonight." Hermione drew a series of intricate symbols in the air, reinforcing the wards. "I've anticipated direct magical intrusion, but not a physical attack. We have to assume he's sending someone, maybe more than one, to probe for weaknesses. And if he comes himself," her voice faltered, the thought unfinished. Neville moved closer to Rose's crib, protective instinct sharpening. "We need contingency rooms, secure pathways. If he tries to strike, we need to separate him from her immediately." Ron muttered, hands clenched around his wand. "I vote we don't just wait. We strike first. Show him he can't touch us." Harry shook his head. "We can't risk Rose. Defensive is the only option. Any offensive move could draw him to her before we're ready." A sudden cold brushed the edges of the house, raising the hairs on their arms. Ginny stiffened, the ring thrumming like a heartbeat in her palm. The whisper was clear now, urgent. "He is here. Watch her. Claim her." Before anyone could respond, the front door burst open. Shadows poured in, and cloaked figures moved like predators, silent and precise. Spells flared instantly. Harry, Ginny, Hermione, Ron, and Neville fired as one. The house shook with the clash of magic, wards flaring to life along the walls, turning every doorway into a defensive barrier. Ginny felt the ring pulse violently, feeding her bursts of strength she had never known. She had to fight against it, had to maintain control, even as her spells became stronger than she intended, wild with raw magical energy. One of the intruders reached for Rose's crib, but Neville reacted in an instant. Green vines erupted from the floor, wrapping around the attacker, holding him firmly in place. Hermione cast a precise binding spell, sending two others sprawling backward into the wall. Harry faced the last intruder, wand steady, eyes sharp. "Who sent you?" he demanded. The figure laughed, a cold sound that echoed through the walls. "Heir. You know his name. You know what he wants. And you cannot hide her from him forever." Ginny's fingers tightened around the ring, resisting the urge to unleash its full power. She felt the energy coiling, dangerous and intoxicating, whispering promises of domination and control. But she held firm. "Not tonight," she said, voice steady despite the ring's insistent tug. The intruders reeled from their attacks, and the house itself seemed to pulse with protective energy. The wards glowed brighter, responding to both the threat and the determination of the defenders. Outside, the storm intensified, as though the world itself was aware that the heir had taken a direct interest in the child. Harry looked down at Rose, who lay in her crib, small fists curling instinctively. "We've slowed him for now," he said quietly, though his jaw tightened. "But this is just the beginning. He knows where we are. And he's coming." Ginny placed a hand over his, the ring humming faintly under her touch. Then we prepare, and we stay together, no matter what. And far away, the heir's eyes narrowed. A cold, calculating smile spread across his face. They think they are safe, he whispered. But the child will come to me, and when she does, the world will bend to her bloodline. The night outside Grimald Place raged on, wind and rain masking the quiet, unstoppable approach of a power that would not be denied. The silence after the clash was almost unbearable. Grimald Place, still humming with the echoes of wards and curses, felt alive, like a living creature bracing for the next strike. Smoke drifted through the drawing room, carrying the acrid scent of burnt wood and singed magic. Harry lowered his wand slowly, scanning every shadow. Is everyone all right? Ron leaned against the wall, catching his breath. Nothing serious. Just a graze. His sleeve was torn, blood staining the fabric, but he shrugged it off. Hermione crouched near the bound intruders, her wand tip glowing as she inspected the magical bindings. These aren't just mercenaries. They've been enchanted, enhanced. Look at their eyes. Everyone leaned closer. The captured figures, their faces pale and stiff, had irises clouded with unnatural silver. They stared ahead, unblinking, their mouths moving faintly as though whispering prayers or curses to an unseen master. Neville grimaced. They're puppets. He's not just controlling them, he's hollowed them out. Ginny held Rose close now, the baby stirring faintly but not crying. The ring on her finger was cool again, the pulse subsiding as though it, too, was recovering from the surge of power. If he can do this to wizards, imagine what he'll try with her. He won't stop. Not ever. Hermione's voice was grim. These attackers are only the beginning. He sent them to test the wards, to test us. The real strike hasn't come yet. Harry's eyes hardened. Then we make sure we're ready when it does. They spent hours combing through the wreckage of the battle. Ron and Neville reinforced weak spots where the wards had strained. Hermione transfigured parts of the flooring into runic circles to anchor stronger protections. Ginny stayed with Rose, refusing to let her out of her sight for even a moment. But even as they worked, a weight pressed against them all. The intruders had not screamed or begged. They had only repeated that one haunting phrase, "The child will come to him." Later, as night deepened, Harry gathered everyone around the table. The fire flickered low, casting their faces in shadow. We can't just react. We need to know exactly what we're up against. The heir has already found a way to use bloodline magic to control others. He's after Rose because she represents something even greater. Hermione nodded. We need to find out the extent of his knowledge. If he's tapping into the same magic Voldemort once sought, then we're dealing with ancient, nearly forgotten curses. Bloodline magic is older than Hogwarts itself. There are very few texts left that deal with it, and most of those were banned centuries ago. Ron groaned. So let me guess. We're going on another library crawl, except instead of dusty old books, we're looking for cursed ones that try to bite us. Neville leaned forward. It's not just books. The old families, some of them still hold traditions, secrets, maybe even protections we don't know about. If we can convince them to speak, they might give us an edge. Ginny's jaw tightened. Convince them? Or trust them? Because after everything, I don't trust anyone outside this house with her. Harry looked at her, then at Rose, who was curled in her mother's arms, her tiny breath steady. We'll protect her. But we need information. Hermione, you and I will look into the archives at the Ministry. Neville, you and Ron reach out to anyone in the old families who might be sympathetic. Ginny's eyes narrowed. I already know my role. She looked down at Rose, brushing a hand gently over her head. I stay with her. No matter what. Hermione hesitated. But Ginny, if the ring is connected to him, you're vulnerable too. I said no matter what, Ginny cut in, her voice sharp. For a moment, the room was silent, the weight of her words settling over them. Harry reached across the table, placing his hand over hers. Then we'll make sure both of you are safe. Whatever happens, we face it together. Far away, in the cold depths of an abandoned fortress, the heir sat before a massive stone table, his silver eyes glowing faintly. The defeated intruders appeared in his vision, kneeling in spectral form, their bindings visible even across the distance. He smiled. They think this was my first move. They think they've bought time. But they've only shown me their strength, and their weaknesses. He lifted his hand, and a spectral map flared to life before him. At its center pulsed a tiny light, the child. He traced the air above it with one finger. The house protects her. The wards hold her. But walls are nothing against blood. And blood always calls to blood. The storm beyond the fortress rumbled, as if the earth itself trembled at the promise of what was to come. The ministry archives were colder than Harry had expected. Even with the protective wards in place, the air felt heavy with centuries of forgotten spells, dust, and secrets. Hermione led the way, her wand illuminating the towering shelves stacked with books that looked older than Hogwarts itself. "This section," she whispered, pointing to a narrow alcove, "contains restricted texts on bloodline magic. Most of it was hidden after the Dark Lord's rise. Even Dumbledore didn't fully trust these volumes to remain accessible." Harry glanced around nervously. "So we're looking for a needle in a stack of enchanted haystacks, and some of them might bite." Hermione's lips twitched in a faint smile. "More like enchanted needles designed to pierce you if you're unworthy." She pulled down a massive tome, its cover cracked and worn, the pages yellowed but filled with tight, looping script. "Here. Gaunt lineage, Horcrux methods, and spells tied to blood inheritance. If the heir is using any of these techniques to track Rose or manipulate the locket, this will tell us how." Harry leaned over the open pages, scanning quickly. Symbols, incantations, and warnings filled the margins. It's like a combination of memory and magic. He can sense her, influence objects connected to her, maybe even foresee our moves if we aren't careful. Hermione nodded. "Exactly. But it also details countermeasures. Anchors, wards, protective charms that can limit influence across bloodlines. We just have to find the right ones and adapt them to our situation." A faint chill ran down Harry's spine as he traced the diagrams of magical circles and glyphs. So the heir is already using these techniques. That means every step we take, he can sense, maybe even manipulate, unless we do this perfectly. Hermione flipped to another page, eyes scanning rapidly. There's mention of a dual anchor spell. One object anchors the protective magic, another the vulnerable subject. It's designed to shield a person from bloodline interference, but it's complicated and unstable. If done wrong, she shivered slightly, it can worsen the connection instead of severing it. Harry ran a hand through his hair. "We have no room for mistakes. Rose can't be endangered, not for even a second." Hermione nodded firmly. "That's why we'll work together. We combine our magic, our understanding of the wards, and the locket's containment. If done correctly, we might be able to sever, or at least mask, her link to the heir temporarily." Harry swallowed. "Temporarily. That's all we get." Hermione's eyes softened. "It's all we can manage without raising suspicion. The heir is patient, clever. This isn't over once we finish. But it will give us an edge, even if only for a little while." Harry clenched his jaw. "Then we start now. Every second we wait is time he can use to track her." Hermione nodded and began setting up magical circles, carefully inscribing glyphs in the air. Harry mirrored her, casting counterchants as their combined magic wove a protective layer around the text and in thought around Rose. Hours passed in tense concentration. The air shimmered faintly around them, charged with residual energy from the wards, the spells, and the anticipation of confrontation. Every noise, every shift of shadows, made them glance nervously at the entrance. But nothing disrupted them. For now they were alone, focused, and united against a threat that could reach across miles. Finally, Hermione exhaled, lowering her wand. "It's stable for now. The dual anchor is in place. If he attempts to sense or influence Rose directly, he'll encounter a buffer that should distort or delay his connection." Harry ran a hand over his face, exhausted but relieved. "Good. That gives us breathing room, at least. How long do you think it will hold?" Hermione hesitated. "It's hard to say. Could be days, could be hours. But every moment counts. We need to use this time to plan, to find allies, and to prepare for when he inevitably makes his next move." Harry glanced down at a small sketch Hermione had made of the protective circle's configuration. "Then we don't waste a second. Every spell, every precaution, every ounce of magic we have goes into keeping her safe. The air won't touch her, not while we stand." Outside, the wind howled faintly against the ministry windows. The storm beyond Grimald Place and across the wizarding world seemed to echo the intensity of the coming confrontation. And far away, in a shadowed fortress where the heir waited, silver eyes gleamed with calculating patience. "They think they've gained time," he whispered. "But time is a luxury I never needed. Soon she will come. And when she does, no ward, no trick, no protector will keep her from me." The next morning at Grimald Place was tense and silent. The dual anchor spell had been set, its faint shimmer still hovering over the drawing room. The air felt charged, every corner seeming to hum with anticipation. Harry, Ginny, Hermione, Ron, and Neville gathered to discuss the next phase of their defense and strategy. "We can't just wait for him to come," Harry said firmly. "He's patient, yes, but he's also calculating. The moment he senses any vulnerability, he'll strike. We need to anticipate his moves, not just react to them." Hermione nodded, spreading out parchments covered in notes and diagrams. "The heir's bloodline magic is highly sensitive. He can trace objects, sense protective spells, and manipulate weak points in wards. But he's also overconfident. He believes no one can resist him fully. That's the advantage we have. We plan for everything, but we maintain unpredictability." Ron leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. "So what's the plan? Do we set more traps? Make the house explode with charms? Or just wait until he walks into our perfect little death zone?" Neville's eyes sparkled with determination. "We prepare for both. Wards, counterspells, and defensive charms aren't enough. We need to train ourselves, and Rose, eventually, to recognize and resist influence. If he comes personally, we can't rely on magic alone." Ginny, holding Rose gently, glanced at the ring on her finger. Its faint pulse reminded her of the whispers that still lingered in her mind, subtle but persistent. "We also need to monitor the heir's influence on me and the locket. Every minute counts. If he starts manipulating us, even indirectly, Rose is at risk." Hermione tapped the parchment again, pointing at symbols and protective glyphs. "We reinforce the wards around the house, create decoys, and establish escape routes. But there's another step. We need intelligence. Anything that tells us his next move. If we can anticipate his timing, we can prepare, not just defend." Harry's jaw tightened. "Then we split tasks. Hermione and I handle magical countermeasures and intelligence gathering. Neville and Ron reinforce the wards and set up contingencies. Ginny, you stay with Rose. Keep her safe and monitor the ring. Nothing happens without your input." Ginny's hand tightened around the baby, nodding resolutely. "I won't let him touch her. Not ever." The day passed in a flurry of activity. Hermione pored over magical texts, cross-referencing bloodline magic and Gaunt family lore. Harry practiced complex defensive spells, refining his control to counter any manipulation. Neville and Ron reinforced barriers and set up decoy enchantments to confuse and mislead any intruder. Ginny remained close to Rose, the ring humming faintly in her hand, a constant reminder of the threat that loomed. As dusk fell, the first sign of the heir's approach became clear. Outside, the air shifted subtly, the protective wards pulsing in response to a nearby presence. The wind carried an unnatural chill, and shadows elongated unnaturally along the walls. Harry glanced at Ginny. "He's coming. Tonight, we may face him directly." Ginny's grip on Rose tightened. "We'll be ready. Together." Far away, the air moved with purpose. The storm had passed, leaving a cold, sharp night in its wake. His followers were already in motion, acting as scouts and probes, but this time he advanced personally. Silver eyes glinted with a mixture of patience and hunger. "They have hidden her well," he murmured, voice soft but deadly. "But no ward, no spell, no trick will keep her from me. Soon, the child will be mine, and the world will bend to the power of her bloodline." Back at Grimald Place, the group huddled together, knowing the confrontation they had been preparing for had finally arrived. Every heartbeat carried the weight of anticipation, fear, and determination. The air was close, and the final confrontation, one that could decide the fate of Rose and the bloodline, was only hours away. The night was unnaturally still. Grimald Place, reinforced with layers of Hermione's protective wards and Neville's plant-based barriers, stood like a fortress against the storm outside. Yet within, the tension was palpable. Every shadow, every whisper of wind, carried the weight of the coming confrontation. Harry, Ginny, Hermione, Ron, and Neville stood together in the drawing room, wands ready, eyes sharp. The locket rested on its reinforced pedestal, the ring on Ginny's finger pulsing faintly, almost impatiently. Every heartbeat seemed amplified, as if the house itself waited with them. "The heir is close," Harry said quietly, his scar tingling with the familiar, cold warning. "We've done everything we can. Now we hold." Ginny pressed a hand to Rose, who lay sleeping in her crib, small and unaware of the danger surrounding her. "We protect her. No matter what." Outside, the air shimmered, a subtle distortion that rippled across the wards. Shadows twisted unnaturally, forming a dense, creeping presence. And then he appeared. The heir, tall and imposing, silver eyes glowing faintly, his presence suffused with an almost tangible aura of malice. "Potter," he whispered, voice like ice. "You cannot hide her forever. The bloodline calls, and the child will come to me." Harry stepped forward, wand raised. "Not while we stand." The heir smiled thinly, and the room shivered as his power pressed against the protective spells. The wards flared in response, but cracks appeared in their defenses, subtle yet alarming. Ginny felt the ring pulse violently, the whispers urging her to strike, to overwhelm, to let the raw magic surge unchecked. "No," she muttered, shaking her head. "Not like this." Together, Hermione began a rapid chant, reinforcing the dual anchor spell around Rose, while Neville and Ron cast defensive and offensive spells in precise coordination, creating a protective web around the room. Harry advanced carefully, his eyes locked on the heir, ready to counter every movement, every magical strike. The heir moved like a shadow, teleporting across the room, his attacks precise, his spells twisting and probing for weakness. Yet the group held firm, their combined magic forming a barrier that resisted his influence. The locket on its pedestal glowed brightly, feeding off the tension, but remaining under their control. Ginny's pulse raced as the ring vibrated insistently, a torrent of power and temptation. She clenched her jaw, focusing, drawing strength from Harry's presence and Hermione's steady incantations. Slowly, the whispers dimmed, replaced by a clear, resolute intent: protect Rose at all costs. The heir's attacks intensified, a whirlwind of silver light and shadow magic. Walls shook, the floor groaned, and sparks of raw energy leapt through the room. But the group moved as one, Harry blocking and deflecting, Hermione stabilizing spells, Neville reinforcing barriers, Ron countering, and Ginny channeling the ring's energy safely into the dual anchor spell. With a coordinated surge, the group struck together. Harry's spell, Hermione's countercharm, and Ginny's controlled energy from the ring converged on the heir, forcing him backward. His eyes widened, momentarily startled, as the sheer force of their combined power held him at bay. "You underestimate them," he hissed, fury flashing across his features. "The child is mine." Ginny stepped forward, voice steady, eyes blazing. "No, she is ours to protect." The ring flared, not with domination but with controlled strength, amplifying the dual anchor spell. The locket shivered, its glow stabilizing, its pulse now in sync with Rose's heartbeat. The heir's power recoiled, unable to penetrate the combined defenses. With one final coordinated push, the group forced the heir back, shattering his immediate connection to Rose and the magical objects. He reeled, clearly weakened but not destroyed, and then, with a cold, venomous smile, he vanished into shadow, leaving the house trembling but intact. Silence settled over Grimald Place. The storm outside had passed, leaving the night eerily calm. Harry sank into a chair, exhaustion pulling at him, while Ginny held Rose close, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "He's gone for now," Hermione said quietly, checking the wards and ensuring stability. "But he's not finished. He'll come again. And next time, he'll be even more dangerous." Neville exhaled, relief mingled with tension. "We did it, though. We held him off. We protected her." Ron muttered, exhausted but relieved. "Yeah, but let's never do that again." Ginny looked down at Rose, tiny fists curling against her chest. "We'll always protect her. Whatever it takes. Together." Harry placed a hand on Ginny's shoulder, looking at her, at Rose, at their friends. "Together, always. We've faced the worst of the darkness. And we'll face whatever comes next. But for now she's safe. And that's what matters." Far away, in the shadows, the heir's eyes gleamed, silver and calculating. They may have delayed me, but the child will come to me. And when she does, nothing will stop the power of her bloodline. But for now, in Grimald Place, the family held each other close. The locket and the ring rested safely, their pulse in tune with Rose's, a symbol of the victory they had won. Temporary, fragile, but real. And for the first time in a long while, they allowed themselves a moment of peace, knowing that together, they could face whatever darkness the future held. The war for the child's destiny was far from over, but for now, the Potter family had won the night.